This is LBC from Global. Leading Britain's conversation. Speak to Sadiq. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, takes your calls.
Good morning, it's 3 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Well, actually, we used to do it differently, didn't we, on days like today? We used to let the Mayor of London do the introduction and identify as a radio presenter for a few minutes.
Yeah, that was when I was demoted to a radio presenter, but I realised that actually I just keep my elevated position as the Mayor of London and let you be the humble radio presenter. But good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here for this month's version of Speak to Sadiq, and looking forward to speaking to and listening to as many callers as I can.
Which we will start rattling through imminently. But first, a quick word on the 7th anniversary of Brexit, marked in slightly strange fashion on the BBC last night. Are you having a drinks reception at City Hall or setting off party poppers on the terrace?
Well, the key thing I want to get across today to those Londoners who are originally from the EU is to say thank you. Thank you for staying over the last 7 years. Many of these people are our friends, neighbours, colleagues and loved ones, and they've had a rotten 7 years, been used as bargaining chips when it came to negotiating with the EU. Real question marks about what settled status means. They've had to be in the receiving end of anti-migrant rhetoric from our government, and they've stayed. More than 1.1 million EU Londoners, and I'm really grateful for the contribution they make to food, fashion, financial centre, public services, making our city and our country, in my view, stronger, healthier and more successful.
There's quite a lot of fake news around, not all of it involving cats and benefits. Are you really facing trouble for having a flag? Are they really? Has it really been suggested that City Hall could be prosecuted for displaying the EU flag on the anniversary of the Brexit referendum?
I mean, an example of how crazy things have got is often we fly a flag outside City Hall to show solidarity and support. For example, we'll be flying the Pride flag during the course of this month because it is Pride month. When there are tragedies across the globe, we fly flags of countries where people have been affected. And we thought it'd be a great idea today, on the 7th anniversary, to fly the European Union flag. And lo and behold, we discovered that the law was changed last year, the year before last, which specifically prohibits the flying of the EU flag on a public building unless you go through a laborious, lengthy, burdensome, expensive process to get specific permission from the government. So you can fly the UN flag, you can fly the Commonwealth flag, you can fly the flag for most countries. We're flying the Ukrainian flag.
We're in the UN and the Commonwealth, aren't we? So it's not necessarily quite as anomalous as you're trying to portray.
Well, when there were tragedies in New Zealand, we flew the flag of New Zealand.
Of course, but there aren't tragedies in the EU.
Well, no, but
Brexit might be a tragedy, but it's not quite eggs and eggs.
There are 1.1 million Londoners who are from the EU who, feel they're the other, who, today's an important day for them, and just showing the flag is an act of solidarity with those
But
Londoners.
if you flew it, do you really think that your collective colours would have been felt?
I think the issue is this: I believe in the rule of law. Look, listen, and it's particularly relevant this of all weeks in relation to our former Prime Minister being shown to have broken the law and lied to Parliament. I may not agree with the law. I may not have been responsible for passing it, but it's really important that we follow the law. And what I don't want to do is a symbolic act is on the plus side, but actually breaking the law on the negative side. I'm in favour of not breaking the law.
Shall we start with the calls?
The first caller is from Barnes in South London, and it's James. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
My question for you is, it's about Hammersmith Bridge.
Yeah.
Hammersmith Bridge has now been shut for 4 years, and you're still unable to even cycle over it. The council, TfL and national government all seem more interested in blaming each other for the delays rather than actually solving the problem. And I think as a local resident, quite frankly, I'm a bit sick of it. So I'd like to know from you personally, what are you going to do?
So would I, James. Absolutely. Well, I mean, first of all, don't start passing the buck before we've even drawn breath on this. There must have been more you as Mayor of London could do. It's absolutely bonkers where James is. People have to make 2, 3, 4 mile round trips just to get to the other side of a bridge.
Well, James, so I also share your frustration with the lack of action, but the bridge is owned by the council. The council simply can't afford to do the works required to make the bridge fit for purpose for not just cycles that you mentioned, but also vehicles, including buses. So the council hasn't got the money. We haven't got the money. During the pandemic, our fares box dried up, but also we've got support from the government in relation to a grant, which we're grateful for. The only person that's got the money, the only organisation that's got the money to fix the bridge is the government. And so, the council, ourselves, are lobbying the government to provide the capital support to repair the bridge. Roughly speaking, it's about £150 million, which the council can't afford, nor can we. And, this is a bridge that is listed, and so the repairs aren't straightforward. And so what we're saying to the government is it's in nobody's interest for further delay, because people like you and many others are being inconvenienced. But we've got to, the council's been honest. We've been honest from day one. We need the government to step in and support the community.
Could you find a few quid? The council could find a few quid, and the government could find a few quid.
So at the moment, what James...
It's a Labour council, isn't it, in Hammersmith and Fulham?
Yeah, but the bridge has had problems for decades. But so the issue...
No, I'm just wondering if you think if it were a Conservative council, central government might have been a little bit more active on this.
So James will know this, I'm sure. But so Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary at the time, went down to the bridge and said, if you vote for our Tory candidate for mayor, we will fix the bridge.
Oh, gosh.
He didn't win. He's now in the House of Lords.
Okay. Which one was that? The one who ran the racist campaign, or the one who ran the failed campaign?
It's the lawbreaker.
Okay.
But so and they're playing party politics, and James doesn't care about that. What James wants is the bridge to be sorted out. And so what the council is saying is, look, there is a way through this, but we need support from the government, and we work with the council, work with the government in the meantime to get the bridge open for pedestrians and cyclists. But James is frustrated, as many others are.
James, what's the word on the ground? I mean, because it's a curious issue that I'm quite close to myself. What do active members of the community see as the major sticking point here? Who do you blame, I suppose I'm asking?
It's a good question. I do think we need more national government support in terms of the funding. I completely get those points. I think the frustration here is that it is really being treated as a political football. It seems that everybody is more interested in blaming other parties, and it would be just good. And I get how expensive it is, how old it is, but I mean,
it's crazy. It's a huge bridge crossing one of the biggest rivers, one of the most famous rivers in the whole world, and you can walk across it. I think you can cycle across it, but you can't drive across it. I just briefly, Sadiq Khan, is there light at the end of the tunnel is an odd figure of speech to use in this context.
No, because
is there any
unless the government steps in, James, I can't see where. Let me tell you why. Because most of the people who use the bridge live on the southern side of the bridge. Hammersmith and Fulham on the northern side of the bridge own the bridge. So one of the options being considered is, for example, a toll to pay for the cost of repairing the bridge, which wouldn't be felt as much by residents of Hammersmith and Fulham. For obvious reasons, they use the bridge less. It would be felt by residents on the other side of the bridge. And that's why, for many people on the southern side, that is a non-runner. And I've got, listen, the only show in town is the government, and the government's got to step in. This is a crucial piece of infrastructure in that part of London, in West London, and it discourages people to use public transport and so forth. So, I am concerned about this delay is helping nobody.
I am, James, thank you. I'm sorry that there isn't better news. I am conscious of the closure of a bridge in Hammersmith not necessarily being at the top of the political agenda elsewhere in the country. I can't imagine it's particularly big news in Glasgow this morning, but just imagine, if you are in Glasgow or anywhere else, just imagine a local bridge, and then imagine that it's shut, and then remember that we are supposedly a first world country, or one of the 6 or 7 largest economies in the world, and people like James, and to a much lesser extent myself, have been essentially watching a useless bridge for the best part of 4 years. It's very strange indeed. On we go.
The next caller is from Ladbroke Grove, and it's Vicky. Good morning, Vicky.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning. Yes, I have a very small studio flat, which I've been renting out for 6 years. I've not put the rent up in all that time because having a fixed rate mortgage, I didn't really need to. But the fixed rate ends. So I have 2 choices. I can double the rent and I still won't quite break even. I'll be close, but not close enough. Or I will sell the flat. Either way, my tenant will be rendered host because I presume she wouldn't be able to afford a doubling of the rent. And I wanted to know what the mayor could do or is going to do for people like me to avoid making thousands of tenants homeless.
Well, thanks for calling in, Vicky. At the core of your challenge is obviously the interest rates going through the roof. And so what I've done is written to the Chancellor and Michael Gove, who's responsible for levelling up and local government. I wrote to them this week, suggesting things they could do in their meeting today with mortgage lenders, which may assist you in relation to the fixed term rate coming to an end. A number of things they could do. They could, for a period of time, give people the option of just doing interest only rather than repayment both. Another thing they could do is give people a mortgage holiday without them being penalised by the credit rating agencies. They could have a moratorium in relation to repossessions of those who are struggling to pay it. And so I've set out a number of things the government could do because, I mean, Vicky, you gave the consequences of your example. We discovered this week that if somebody has got a mortgage of £350,000 and they go from a fixed rate of 2.5% to the current rate of 6%, they'll be paying £700 extra a month. And so that's why your case isn't isolated. And so unless the government steps in, working with the mortgage companies and the FCA, I'm afraid your case isn't isolated. Not a lot I can do as the mayor or even the Labour Party in Parliament as the opposition. But there are things the government can do working with the mortgage companies and the FCA.
Vicky, what happens to you? Have you spoken to your tenant yet?
We're dreading it. We're doing it today.
And you're telling them it's going up, it's doubling overnight, essentially.
We're not. At the moment, we're saying we're going to just have to sell it, which is even worse for her because all the rents have gone up so much. Yeah. So our rent is really cheap for her. Yeah. She's going to have to pay double whether she stays with us or goes somewhere else.
Yeah, where her stories...
It's only a studio flat, so I presume she's not rich, and doubling the rent will just not be possible for her.
And you're thinking of selling it because you would struggle to find someone to come in at the new rate of rent, which you'd need to receive to cover your own mortgage.
Correct.
And landlords historically don't necessarily have many listeners or most listeners reaching for their violins, but this is, it's a stupid response to be crass about that because it's a crucial part of the property market in London.
A lot of landlords use the property as their pension, right?
Yes, but also Vicky hasn't put it up for 6 years.
Yeah, no, exactly. There are lots of responsible landlords, and we are now hearing stories about private tenants entering auction in relation to a new property for them to, be a tenant in and stuff. I mean, the supply of affordable housing has not met the demand, which is leading to inflation in the housing market. But the problems we're seeing at the moment, are a consequence, and I'm sorry for a moment to get party political, is the inverted commas mini budget last year and the consequences of mismanagement over a period of time.
Amazing how Sadiq has all of the answers to the government's problems, but none of his own, says this texter. And there was another one here. Please pull up the mayor on the wasted money on the road changes and Ulez cameras and all these other things that they have wasted money on. I think that might pop up in the next question, actually.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, listen, I'm not going to be embarrassed or apologise for talking about the Tory mortgage bombshell, which is what Vicky's suffering. The next call is from Edgware, and it's Sammy. Good morning, Sammy.
Good morning. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking my call.
Pleasure.
I did leave a message a while ago for Mr. Khan about purchasing cars. We feel that we're people who save up for things. We don't have these kind of money saved up to go and purchase these cars. Suddenly you send us a letter out to say, okay, go and buy the cars. We don't have that kind of money. I work for NHS. I do have to travel a lot. I have a lot of people I know, staff, service users, etc. They're all saying they won't be able to go and buy cars out straight away. So they'll end up paying £12.50. Now, I know I came on and my husband had a heart attack as well earlier on, so it's difficult. My fridge went. I had to buy a small one because obviously we couldn't spend a lot of money. Our bills have gone up drastically. We've gone through like virus stage. We've got this war. The food's expensive, bills are high, and it's just.
And you're worried that you're going to have. You're worried you're going to have to pay the Ulez charge in order to get to work and back.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of people, like youngsters, pensioners, older.
Well, let's focus on you, Sammy. Because your situation sounds really difficult, and the mayor's policy is going to make it possibly untenable.
Sammy, I'm very sorry to hear about your circumstances. Can I just check? So you've got a vehicle, and you've checked it, and it's not compliant. It's more than 18 years old, is it?
Yes, it is. It is a good vehicle, but obviously I would have to pay money.
Okay, and you've not received any assistance from Transport for London in relation to supporting you?
No, I've completed the form, but I haven't heard anything.
Okay.
So, I mean, my point wasn't that it's just trying to get funds of anyone. Throughout our lives, we've done things ourselves. If this period was extended, if there was some information also given in advance, there was no leaflets, or it wasn't planned, like 5 years or 4 years. It's suddenly, okay, you go and buy cars. That is not right for everyone. I think it should be planned. It should be in stages. It should be like with car companies. It should be done properly. I don't think that's been done.
Okay.
Sure.
What do you say to that?
Let me deal with Sammy for two things. Firstly, I'm very happy after this is finished to speak to you about how we can assist you personally, but let me deal with the wider issue about should be done in stages. So in 2017 was a first stage of this, where we brought in what's called the toxicity charge in central London. In 2019 was a second stage where we brought in the Ulez in central London, which was higher standards, Euro 6 rather than Euro 4. The further stage was 2021, where we extended it to inner London. So not central London, but inner London up to North Circular and South Circular. And the further stage is this August 29th when it goes to all of London. And the basic reason, Sam, we're doing it is because we know that we've got an air pollution crisis in London, which leads to, in London, around 4,000 premature deaths. Across the country, around 36,000 premature deaths. But in London, not only does it lead to premature deaths, but it leads to children getting stunted lungs forever, but adults with a whole host of health issues from cancer, dementia, heart issues, which I know is relevant to you and your husband, and other health consequences. And so just like 40 years ago, 50 years ago, we knew about the dangers of tobacco and politicians didn't take action, I don't want to be in that situation. So I know of the consequences of air pollution. We're taking action, but we're supporting people to take action. That's why I would like to speak to you after to see what help we can give you. And the good news, Sammy, is in outer London, more than 9 out of 10 cars that are now seen driving are compliant. And in inner London, it's more than 95%. So our policy is not just leading to fewer toxic fumes coming from cars, but the air is better. And I'll tell you an amazing stat. Because of our policies in central London, there's been a third fewer children admitted in hospital with asthma. That shows the difference our policies are making.
What happens if you lose this court case on July the 4th?
Well, let's wait and see what the court case is. I don't want to second guess, but I've said earlier on in relation to the flag issues, I respect the rule of law, right? And let's wait and see what the court case says. We're confident in relation to defending this challenge.
But the other side seem pretty confident too. But I take your point. We'll jump off that bridge when we come to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to speak. Answer this though. Could you ask Mr. Khan the following? With the introduction of the Ulez extension, what his measure of success will be? In a year's time, what will the scheme deliver in real terms to improvements to air quality? If the current measurement is 8 out of 10, what will the Ulez scheme deliver? And if it doesn't work, if he doesn't deliver the improvements he predicts, how will he compensate Londoners?
Good question. So each stage of the Ulez, what we've done is make sure there's a proper study about the benefits of Ulez, which is why I can say with confidence, Central London Ulez led to a reduction of nitrogen dioxide by 44%, particulate matter by 27%, carbon reductions by 6%, because it was assessed properly after a year. The second phase, which was the extension to inner London, a further reduction of 21%. So the expansion to all of London, there are predictions about what will happen, further reductions in nitrogen oxide, particulate matter, carbon emissions. That is assessed, and after a year, we'll have a good idea of the progress we've made in relation to quality of air, which is crucial, but also those who have decided to use public transport, walking or cycling. And I'm really pleased that in outer London, we're going to be introducing the Superloop bus, an orbital bus, to give people alternatives to driving their car where they can.
I mean, we've spoken about this a lot, possibly more than any other subject, and I've also probably articulated more criticism to you and of you on this than any other subject. I'm always keen to get clarity. This is a mission for you. It's different from other political issues, and that parallel with the tobacco is key, because if we went back in time and there was somebody convinced that tobacco needed to be outlawed or massively reduced or advertising it, I mean, even if you were the only one in the room calling for this, you'd still be calling for it. You just happen to be the mayor, which is possibly what some people find so frustrating.
So look, this wasn't an easy decision for me to make. It was a tough decision. Clearly it would have been attractive to kick the can down the road and to delay taking action. But it is personal to me because, whether I was a lawyer or a politician, I like to look at the evidence. And the evidence is quite clear. You listen to the chief medical officer, you look at the evidence from the inquest into the death of Ella Kissi-Debrah, you listen to the experts at Imperial College or at King's College. But also, it is a fact that politicians, positions in power, knew about the dangers of climate change, didn't take action. They knew about passive smoking. You remember this remarkable man called Roy Castle, who used to be a great TV presenter, but a great trumpet player. Roy Castle's case was remarkable to me because Roy Castle is somebody who never smoked a cigarette a day in his life. Because he played the trumpet and worked in men's clubs, he got lung cancer. And I, as an MP, James, in 2006, voted to ban smoking in public places. Nobody would now dream about reintroducing smoking in pubs, reintroducing it in gigs.
So you see it in the same, very much in the same
absolutely,
space, which I hope that helps some people understand, because I understand their frustration as well.
There are more deaths as a consequence of air pollution in the world than there are of lung cancer linked to tobacco.
23 minutes after 10 is the time. Here's one you'll like. Please ask Sadiq Khan why he is a coward and refuses to be interviewed by Nick Ferrari, but will speak with his sycophantic fan, James. That's from Ian. It's something Nick refers to quite regularly, which means I have to ask you the question once or twice a year.
Well, I speak to journalists, presenters all the time, but this show is the most popular show on LBC.
Didn't used to be, so you still made that choice before I became the most popular show on LBC.
Hope it's cause and effect. Had I been on the Ferrari show, that he may still be the popular. But listen, I provide leadership, not followership.
Another call, I think, if we would.
The next caller is from Southwark, and it's Steph. Hey, Steph. Steph, are you there?
Let's try Rowan in Enfield. Rowan, have you got a question for the Mayor?
I do, yeah. So I just wanted to ask Sadiq if he thought, especially on the topic of air pollution, whether the cycle lanes in London could have been implemented better. A lot of areas, especially where I live throughout North London, they're they're ridiculous, to be honest, especially considering the fact that they tend to just cut off, go into bus lanes. If we're talking about cyclist safety and things like this, it doesn't really help for sort of the outer areas when looking at London. And it causes more congestion alongside the lower traffic neighbourhoods. So again, in terms of tackling air pollution as a whole, the way in which cycle lanes throughout London have been delivered sort of go against that. So I just want to get
Do you cycle, Rowan?
Thoughts. I don't, but I sympathise with cyclists.
Rowan, you make a fair point. Let me why your point is fair. Because 95% of roads in our city are owned by different councils. We've got 32 councils and the corporation in the centre. And the problem that creates, Rowan, is each council does its policies in relation to road usage different to each other, different to another borough. So you could be cycling in Borough A, like for example, say Southwark, and you've got great, safe, sensible cycle lanes. You then come to another borough where they've got different policies on cycle lanes, and literally when you cross a traffic light, the quality of cycle lanes changes, but also different boroughs have different policies in relation to what you call low traffic neighbourhoods, the LTNs. And that's why there's been some of the challenges that you're alluding to. And there's a third problem, which is historically we've thought about cycle lanes as going from outer London into the centre. Well, what about those who cycle within a borough or around the orbitals? What we've tried to do, Rowan, is in a collegiate way work with councils, a coalition of the willing, to have a sensible strategic role in relation to the use of road space. We can't force a council, when they own the road, to do a sensible road scheme or a sensible LTN. We can try and persuade them. Some councils do it really well. The Hackneys, the Islingtons, the Southwarks, some do it really badly. The Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, just one example. And so it is a frustration, Rowan, but unless I take over these roads, from the councils, we've got to carry on trying to persuade the coalition of the Willins. And the final point is the issue of unintended consequences of low traffic neighbourhoods, what's called displacement leading to traffic on main roads and other issues around that. That has been a concern in some of the LTNs, and what good councils are doing is making sure they assess the success of an LTN, whether it's working, is leading to displacement, and if it is causing collateral problems, trying to address those. A good council will not make an LTN permanent unless they've properly consulted.
This is, it's another one of those frustrating cul-de-sacs, isn't it, where Rowan makes lots of valid points, you agree that they're valid, and then you say there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, well, unless the government decides to, and I wouldn't support this necessarily, say all the councils are abolished, give me all the roads. I've got to work with coalition with the councils.
Staying with air quality, I haven't checked the provenance of this claim, but I've seen it elsewhere, that the quality of air on the underground is up to 20 times worse than it is on the streets. What are you doing about that?
Yeah, I've seen that flying around as well. It's just that's not true.
It's probably worse down there than it is up here, isn't it?
No, there are issues in relation to dust, in relation to the cabins of drivers driving our tubes, actually. which is a source of concern to me. And so that's why we would take. It's not breaking any laws and it's not a breach of health and safety, but it could be cleaner. And that's why we're taking steps to clean up the air on the underground, the dust particles. We're also working not just to make sure we clean up the air, but working with experts to see what more we can do. One of the challenges is the underground is more than 150 years old, so there's a lot of dust in the tunnels and stuff. But the underground I used this morning is safe to use in relation to dust and air quality. Subsurface, though, isn't safe, and we're breaching not just our own laws in relation to air quality, nitrogen dioxide, but also WHO guidelines.
So what are you doing about it?
The Ulez, right? So before I became mayor...
It's Ulez, is it? Not Ulez? There's a raging debate.
Potatoes.
I'm changing the way I pronounce it. I'm going for Ulez now.
Potatoes. So the issue is this. Look, so the King's College said that the policies that were in place before I became mayor, it would take 193 years to bring our air within lawful limits. They say we can do it by 2025 because of our policies. Ulez is one of them. Euro 6 buses is another one. More electric taxis is another one. More cycling is another one. These are some examples of the policies that means that by 2025 our air will be within legal limits. But for those policies, you'd have to wait another 190 years.
But back briefly to Ulez, if I was starting out now on my own, says Gary, who is a painter and decorator, more of an artisan than a craftsman. I've seen some of his work, and the guy's a decorating genius. But if he was starting out on his own now, he'd have to find the funds to buy a compliant van. And he doesn't think he'd be able to. He started with a $2,000 van to get up and running. Is there help now for anyone starting from scratch, for anyone looking to start up their own business with compliant vehicles?
So if you haven't got a vehicle at all, we can't give you any support to buy a vehicle from scratch. But what I would say is that to be compliant, if it's a petrol vehicle, it's got to be 18 years or newer, and if it's a diesel vehicle, 8 years old or newer. So it's not true to say you've got to buy a brand new electric car or van or minibus for it to be compliant. That is not the case.
Let's try Steph again in Southwark. Steph, has your line been restored?
Yes. Hi.
Hey, Steph. Good morning.
Hi,
Hello.
James. Thanks for taking my call. So I have a question about rental hikes and road landlords. I moved into my room in a 6-bedroom property in 2021, and at that point my rent was $780. Since then, in the last year, my landlord has hiked my rent 3 times and is asking for £1,200 for my room. In addition to that, he's also asking myself and my other roommates to pay an additional £400 each for energy bills, and this is not the first time he's done this. So we keep getting random costs pulled out of thin air. And I'm also a freelancer, so it's quite difficult for me to find alternative accommodation. And I just want to know what you can do to help people like me who are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, paying for somewhere we can't afford, but also not being able to move somewhere which is more within our budget, if there is even anything within our budget in the city, to be honest.
So Steph, I'm really sorry about your case, and the bad news is I, on a daily basis, meet Londoners who are in a similar position to you. We have 2.7 million Londoners who are renting from a private landlord. In Scotland, the Scottish government were persuaded, after lobbying from people like you, politicians, campaigners, to bring in rent freezes. And they first have a rent freeze for 6 months. So rents can go up by a penny for 6 months. For the second 6 months, they've said only a 3% increase can be allowed. We're lobbying the government to do the same. Michael Gove's published a bill which will remove what's called no-fault evictions, but he's not introduced into there any support for affordability for people like you, Steph, because for the foreseeable future, even with a Labour government, even if we build record numbers of affordable homes, the supply doesn't meet demand. And so, the issue of affordability is a big issue. And so short of, the government introducing those sorts of policies in London, I'm really sorry to say, Steph, for the foreseeable future, there is nothing that we can do to support you except to try and, lobby the government for those changes. The point I make to the government is the skies haven't fallen in Scotland since they introduced this policy 8-9 months ago. And the lobbying they've had from landlords saying, listen, if you have rent freezes, the sky's going to fall in. I don't accept the argument. And so we're going to carry on lobbying, Steph, because my worry is people like you will leave London because you can't afford to stay in London.
What are your options, Steph?
I'm not really sure at this moment. Pay this rent until I can no longer afford it, potentially move back in with parents.
Yeah.
As a freelancer, it's just difficult to find a flat anyway, because people want you to be in full-time employment.
Right.
Even if you have a regular income as a freelancer, it's unpredictable. So my options are very limited, to be honest with you. And I just feel like this landlord kind of preys on the fact that myself and others don't really have many other options.
It's a landlord lottery, isn't it? Because Eddie's been in touch as well to say he's just spoken to one who's gleefully told me he's put up his tenant's rate by £300, but it's tied into a fixed rate for another 3 years. So some people are milking it, and then the first caller was the opposite. So it's a complete lottery.
Yeah. And the problem is, it is just it's a free for all. One of the things that we've said to the government is there should be a landlord licensing system as well. And so the thing is, Steph, there are really good, pragmatic, sensible ideas to fix this. This is not one of those insurmountable problems, and it actually doesn't cost the government any money. And by the way, a lot of landlords actually have paid off their mortgage as well. So we mentioned those on a long fixed-term mortgage, those who've had challenges because they're coming up for fixed term, and all landlords haven't got a mortgage, they're mortgage free. So, better support from the government would make a big difference. And my point to the government is, to be fair to them, they did listen during the pandemic, not to support those who are freelancers, but they did support renters during that period, no repossessions and so forth. And I think they can provide support now. And I've written to the Chancellor and Michael Gove asking for support, because I do worry people like you will leave London. It's a talent drain for our city, and we need people like you in our city.
And you get more social division as well, because people who can either get help with their rent from their family or move back in with parents in the southeast within the M25 then get first dibs on the jobs and the
unless you've got bank of mum and dad, you're going to really struggle to live in London. But also, one of the joys of London is our social diversity in relation to, you could be living next door to somebody who's upper middle class, some on the other side who's lower working class. That's the joys of our city, always has been. Unlike other global cities, and we're in danger of losing that.
Speaking of money, what does TfL do with the Ulez money? You can't clean the air with it, and you don't build the cycle lane, so where is it going?
So it goes towards providing the alternatives.
That's a text, by the way.
It goes towards providing the alternatives to driving. So, for example, the new electric buses we've got more. We've now got we've got more than 900 zero-emission electric buses. The money's from the Ulez goes towards that, but the Ulez money is going to dry up very soon because more and more vehicles are becoming compliant. So the first year we make not much money because the setup costs. Years 2 and 3 we make a better money. That goes into buses, and so the Superloop, 1 million kilometres worth of new buses in outer London, more and more electric zero-emission buses. But from year 3, that goes to zero because the predictions are that all the vehicles will be compliant. So we're not going to be making the money as we were in years 1 and 2.
And what is the timeline for changing the qualifying age of vehicles being exempt from the ULEZ charge? Because you say that 92% of vehicles are exempt now. In 2 years' time, if you're still in the role, will that change?
No, the idea is we keep Euro 6, which is the gold standard. Even if there are more cleaner cars, we don't want to move the goalposts again. What we're going to do is make sure that as more and more vehicles become compliant, we also at the same time provide alternatives to cars and vans for those that can use them. Not everyone can. But actually, the other advantage is if you've got to drive for a living, by having other cars off the road that don't need to be there, there's less congestion, which makes it better for you.
I've heard someone call it Ulez. It's an acronym, not some fancy French flourish, says that alliteration fan on my text line. Should we take one more?
The next caller is, I think, from Romford, and it's David. Good morning, David.
Oh, hello there. It's not actually Romford, it's Thurrock, but it's pretty close.
Okay. Sorry, David.
While I'm sitting out here now, there's a constant stream of aeroplanes going above my house, going to the city airport, all the time, one every 3 minutes. What sort of amount of pollution is coming out of those planes?
So
compared with cars, all the cars.
Yeah, so aviation pollution is an issue, both in terms of air quality, but also noise. As you just talked about, every 3 minutes you can hear the sound.
You get that on the tube. Sorry, I shouldn't interrupt. You deal with David.
And so that's one of the reasons why, David, I'm not in favour of expanding City Airport, not in favour of a new runway at Heathrow Airport, not just because of the air pollution, carbon emissions, but also the noise pollution as well. At the same time, we're saying to the aviation industry, you've got to use innovation to make sure you're emitting less carbon and less air pollution. So, for example, there are some airlines exploring the use of sustainable aviation fuel, and other advances in technology, because you're right, there is carbon emissions and air pollution from aviation. In London, the three biggest causes of air pollution, climate change are transport, offices and homes. We're taking action on transport from City Hall. That's what we've got powers to do. But also we're having an impact on new developments, but we're lobbying the government for powers in relation to retrofitting.
Again, for people like David, not a great deal you can do about aeroplanes in the sky above London City Airport, except
no. But the point I think David was trying to make is there are other causes of air pollution. Yes. Yeah, and so it's not not doing one because there's another. Actually, it's doing what you can, and we've got to make sure that we do whatever we can to address the issue of air pollution and climate change, and also reducing congestion.
A couple of slightly more flippant questions. Would you be worried if Boris Johnson became a London mayoral candidate?
The flippant answer is bring it on.
And morning, James. It's on a similar theme, actually. May I ask if there is any news regarding the opening of the Garden Bridge? That's from Harvey.
Yeah, in Boris Johnson's mind, he's not just opened the Garden Bridge, but also the Thames Estuary Airport, and also the bridge from here to Northern Ireland as well.
We'll squeeze in one more.
It's Isla from Hackney. Good morning, Isla.
Good
No,
morning.
there it is. Quickly, Isla, if you would.
I was wondering if, as young people like me, how you're preparing them to get into careers.
Anything to help young people getting into work.
Great question, Isla. So we're doing a number of things to help young people get into work. I'm now responsible for the adult education budget. That's those above the age of 19. So we're providing a number of courses, free courses, for young people who aren't working to have the skills for the jobs that we know are being created. What we've done now with adult education is work with employers, saying, listen, you've got a business locally. You work with the college to work with us to provide, help draft the syllabus, the curriculum, which means people who do the course will get the job when they leave. And the good news is that that's leading to more and more people getting the jobs in London that are being created in the green sector, in the tech sector, in culture, in social care, and in the health service as well. And the other thing, Isla, if you're below the age of 18, this summer, and we have for the last year, providing courses and things to do in education, employment, to give people training to get jobs going forward as well. And, if you've not got a mentor and you're below the age of 24, go to the City Hall website. We're also providing young people with mentors who often provide good career advice, good support and good assistance to help them into, jobs or training or something they've not thought about.
Isla, good luck. 20 minutes to 11 is the time. That's almost it. I just ask your quick response to the topic I'll probably be doing after you leave the studio. Why do you think the government failed to put up a cabinet minister for question time last night when they were examining the 7-year anniversary of Brexit?
Well, I think it's telling that not only is there no government minister on question time when the audience is full of people who voted for this form of Brexit, but there's no prominent Brexiteer who went on question time as well. They brought out a minister from the 80s. I think it's really important for us to recognise, listen, whether you voted for Remain or voted for Brexit, there's this vow of silence from the government not talking about Brexit. Brexit is not working. Look at any metrics, whether it's the size of our economy, whether it's productivity, whether it's the cost of food, whether it's the exports we do to the European Union and elsewhere around the world. Why are we talking about it? You could still be somebody who voted a certain way, but recognise there's a problem and try and fix it. Here's the irony. The people who will make Brexit, less painful are probably going to be Remainers because they understand there are problems, they're trying to fix it.
When might we expect a member of the shadow cabinet to say any of that?
Well, listen, my job is to be the Mayor of London and speak for our city, but I know that, I heard David Lammy recently talking about the importance of having a good deal with the European Union, convergence with the European Union as recently as the last few days. And the reality is this, the choice is divergence from the EU, Singapore on the Thames, or convergence with our closest neighbour, a market of £500 million, and as I said at the beginning, neighbours, friends, colleagues and loved ones.
Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, always a pleasure, and we will be returning to similar territory, no doubt, next month. The time now is 10:42.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 10:46 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we're going to do something a little bit different next. And I just want to stress, we're not doing the Brexit phoning yet. We will do, I promise. Do you want to know the truth? it's really hard to launch a topic off the back of Speak to Sadiq, because you've all sat back and sort of settled into a different sort of format from normal, and it's not the top of the hour. So I thought we'd do something a little softer, as it were. It's a horrible story, but in terms of having a view on it, it's a bit easier perhaps than getting stuck straight into that 7-year anniversary. And it's prompted by a conversation I had with one of my godchildren last night, who was in a state of righteous indignation, and I understood why. But I also understood why the thing that they were in a state of righteous indignation about was happening. And I failed properly to... I mean, listen, when you're dealing with a passionate teenager, a politically passionate teenager, and I used to be one, so I do know of what I speak in this field, it's a bit naive to think that you're going to be able to close the conversation down, that you're going to reach a point where the other person goes, oh, okay, yeah, no, I get it now. It's not outrageous at all. But the thing that had really boiled their blood, and they're very bright, very edgy, lovely kid, 15, if it matters. The thing that had boiled their blood was the coverage of the submarine, found yesterday to have imploded shortly after contact was lost. So this... several days of epic tension in your life, possibly, but certainly in your media, was misplaced anyway. But the 5 people who lost their lives, including three Brits, actually, I think they were all Brits, weren't they? Apart from the people that actually worked for the company, Hamish Harding, Shahzada, and Suleiman Darwood. The scale of the coverage and the comparison that my godchild made was with the 200 children missing from UK government asylum centres. They went missing, mostly of Albanian origin. They went missing in January, I think, and no one seemed to care much. There was a little bit of movement on that story yesterday. And I completely understood this, what would you call it, this juxtaposition of stories. I completely understood the emotional investment in this juxtaposition of stories, and I tried to explain that and it was a clumsy conversation. I didn't do a very good job of explaining it. So I thought I'd ask you to. You need to explain to someone who is righteously furious, not that this story here got so much coverage, but that it got so much more than the 200 children, I think the figures come down a bit since January, who have disappeared. Some of them almost certainly sort of trafficked, spirited into criminal gangs. I mean, a story that should push all sorts of red top tabloid buttons or Daily Mail shaped buttons, shouldn't it? I mean, it's a story that really should push buttons. And yet the conspiracy of silence is frankly deafening, if you pardon that contradiction in terms. And I couldn't do it. So I tried the obvious answers, which is it's just a better story. And that's a bleak analysis, isn't it? You're trying to tell a relatively idealistic teenager that the reason why 5 people who went on a tourist trip in a submarine and disappeared are a better story, and disappeared in the middle of the North Atlantic. That is a better story than 200 children in the care of the UK government vanishing from facilities in Kent. You know, just down the road from where I'm talking to you, metaphorically speaking. And the contrast in coverage just sort of struck me as something that is interesting. So I tried to explain that it was a better story. And I hope this doesn't upset you. It upset them a bit. It just is. It just is. Julian Southwark says, imagine if 154 public school children had gone missing on a school trip. What would the coverage of that be like? It's a brilliant point, actually. I think it makes my point better than I've managed to do so far. So 154 privately educated children, a plane comes down in the Andes and it is believed that they're still alive. The search for them would be absolutely huge, wouldn't it? We'd be talking of nothing, and not just privately educated, actually. British school children in a plane that came down in the middle of the Hindu Kush or something like that, or in the Amazon rainforest, and they'd be sending everyone to be off on a mission. They'd be the question of the story being bigger But also, there's slightly different factors at play here as well, I think. It's not just the size of the story, which I couldn't properly explain, and I'd like you to try. 0345 6060973. I don't think that it is relevant how rich they are. I've seen some odd conversations on social media about taxation being part of this story, and I don't agree with that. I mean, and even if I did, I probably wouldn't have been making those points while 5 families are waiting to hear whether their sons and husbands and fathers and grandfathers are dead or alive. I don't think I would be suggesting this is a good time to call for them all to pay more tax, especially as one of them's only 19. But I'm pretty confident that if the 5 people on the submarine had been submarine workers, the story would have got almost as much coverage. Or if or let's just say it had cost 500 quid to go on it rather than 250 grand. I think it would have got as much coverage, probably. Do you? That's another question, which might be relevant to the bigger question that we're asking. And then just the way the human mind works. Because if I say to you it's a bigger story, it's a bit of a cop-out. Because what I'm really saying to you, and this is the difficult bit. This is the really difficult bit. What I'm really saying to you is that for some reason, you care more about Hamish Harding, Shahzada and Suleiman Dawood, Paul-Henri Nargiolet and Stockton Rush disappearing in a submersible in the middle of the North Atlantic than you do about 150-odd children who disappeared from a facility you pay for in the country you call home 6 months ago and haven't been heard from since. So why do we care more about these men than we do about those children? That's the question I couldn't get past with my outraged 15-year-old godchild. And now you've got to examine your own conscience. Conscience is a bit pompous. You've just got to examine your own feelings on this. What have you spent more time thinking and worrying about? I mean, how much is chicken and how much is egg? Media concentration on this story. It has a filmic feel to it. I hope that doesn't sound cynical, but you are desperate to get to the denouement. You want to know how it ends. But why don't you feel that way about 150 odd children who've disappeared from government facilities in Dover? You know, you've got a Home Office that is in charge of these children. They've disappeared. Some of them seen, I think, sort of getting into cars that they shouldn't have been getting into. Some of them, I think, have been subsequently arrested, having been caught robbing or shoplifting or thieving. The likelihood, if it hasn't been proven already, will almost certainly be that criminal gangs have been involved. I don't know. I mean, why do we care more about these 5 people we've never met than we do about the 150-odd children that we have also never met? I just thought it might be interesting. That's all. 0345 606 0973. And for the record, for clarity, there's no argument here. Well, there was last night, but only because I wasn't really hitting my marks very well. I don't think there's anything wrong with the media cut. Well, possibly you do, actually, in which case I'd love to hear from you. Possibly it does speak to a slightly sinister worldview that has gripped us in recent years. I don't think so. I think this would be a huge story at any point in history. I think it would be almost certainly as huge, even if the people on the boat weren't billionaires, or in one case, of course, the son of a billionaire, and in 2 cases, workers essentially, or part of the company that provided the trips. I don't think there's anything sinister in the prioritisation of this story above others. We haven't done it big on this show because I don't really see how it works as a phone-in programme. I don't. What would you say that hasn't been said already? But this conversation obviously does have mileage. Why? Why does that story garner so much more attention than this story? But crucially, and this is the tricky one to answer, and I'm bottling it at the moment, but I'll let you go first and then I'll have a go. Why do we care more about these men than those children? Normally, geographical proximity creates a priority or linguistic commonality. You're more interested in stories about Americans and Australians than you are about French and Germans. For some reason, call it the Anglosphere or shared Anglo-Saxon heritage or something weird, I don't know. And similarly, stories that happen nearer to us are generally more interesting to us than stories that happen far away. And the second thing is not true here. 153 children, I think, still missing. Nothing in the news, really. I'm struggling to find the story being mentioned since January of this year. And yet this story, you're never going to forget it, and it has been absolutely everywhere. Let's start with Sam in Rickmansworth. Sam, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'm afraid I'm incredibly cynical. I also live. I've got 2 teenagers.
Yes.
We've had similar conversations.
Have you?
And I think it boils down to one is easy journalism and one is more in-depth journalism. And the submarine story, as sad and as heartbreaking as it is, was either going to have one of 2 outcomes. It was either going to be wonderfully successful or very, very heartbreaking for the families involved. And so it's easy to follow, easy to report on. You're getting constant updates, which makes it really, really straightforward to, hit a new headline if you need to, for time and online and digital media. And it's not that we don't care. We do care. We do desperately care. Of course we do. The second you say it, it's immediately obvious. However, you require months and months of research. No one knows where the children are. You're not going to instantly find an answer or in 4 hours have a change in the situation that allows you to update your headlines. And so it's simply on that level.
How do you prove that you care? I mean, is this your conversations at home have been similar to the one I had, presumably?
Yeah.
How do you prove?
Yeah.
How do you prove that we, as a collective, as a society, as a country, how do you prove that we care as much about those children as these adults?
Well, you point to the charities that are trying to support.
Yes.
You point to our social care system. You point to the fact that we are even having these conversations. And then you say to the teenagers, it's up to you. You are going to be the future journalists. You are going to be the future newspaper editors. You have online content that you could write today. Use your voice. And the fact that we're even having these conversations shows that we care. And I think that is what
you did a better job than me.
Have to stick to.
You did. Hand on heart, you did a better job than me, actually.
Well, thank you for that.
I'd cooked, though. Had you cooked?
It's logistics.
It could be. And I'm going to stay with the question and also that question of caring about how do you persuade someone that society cares as much about that. I mean, there's 86 children missing from Sussex alone. Some have been arrested after disappearing from these hotels, mainly for drugs and theft offences, which means they've almost certainly been spirited into criminal gangs. Possession with intent to supply drugs in Gloucester, cultivation of cannabis in Tottenham. Kieran Jenkins at Channel 4 News doing absolutely superb work on this, but garnering a mere fraction of the attention that the tragedy at sea has garnered over the last few days. So just explain it if you can. Not so much to me, although I needed a bit of help, as Sam just demonstrated, but to the teenager questioning the priorities of the society that we all share. It's coming up to 11 o'clock. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It is 3 minutes after 11 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Talking at the moment about the Titanic. I heard James Cameron, the director of Titanic, but also a world authority on undersea exploration and undersea engineering. And he was in an oddly lyrical mood, actually. I heard him being interviewed elsewhere this morning. And talked about the hubris involved in calling the submersible that is now believed to have, we know it has, the wreckage of the tourist submarine has been found just 1,600 feet from the sunken liner. But he talks about the hubris of calling it Titan, and that warnings about possible safety issues had been ignored in much the same way that warnings about a blooming great iceberg were ignored on the bridge of the original Titanic. And it is, I think, now believed that the implosion occurred about at the time when the Titan first lost contact with its mothership, the Polar Prince, under 2 hours after submerging on Sunday. But without any edge or angle, we are examining a truth. And the truth is that we, and you might dispute the use of the word we, find this story much more interesting and engaging than the 154 children still missing in this country, having disappeared from asylum processing centres in Sussex and Kent. That's all. Having obviously not been the only dining table in the country last night where this was discussed with a degree of disbelief by younger family members, I don't share the disbelief, and I don't even criticise the status quo. I could tell you now that the traffic to LBC's website on this story would have broken records. It just grabs the imagination in ways that are utterly undeniable. But quite often on this programme, when we're presented with big stuff, we're more interested in the why than the what. And I hadn't paused previously to wonder why. Why are we so much more interested in this? And then inevitably you're led to the question of why are we so uninterested in 154 missing children? 5 minutes after 11 is the time. I don't know that those two questions are actually the same. Chris is in Cowbridge. Chris, what would you like to say?
Hi, hello, James. Thanks for taking my call.
You're most welcome.
I'm a big fan of read your books, and thank you. Thank you for my political education since 2016. So thank you for that. The point I wanted to make, and it's a really uncomfortable point about the children, is that when I remember hearing it, first of all, it was reported that these were refugee children, like illegal refugee. I hate that expression,
right?
But these were illegal refugee children. And I'm just going to postulate that perhaps it doesn't run into a right-wing media narrative to get into humanising refugees.
Or portraying them as vulnerable or even human beings that we should care about.
Exactly, because it doesn't run into the narrative of the fifth pledge of Stop the Boats. It doesn't run into... If you start making these real people, like we welcome the Ukrainian people, because, and I'm really sorry to say this, because they look like us, if we were running with that kind of narrative, it's not in the sort of right-wing media's interest. And it sounds so callous. But
I mean, it's accurate. You can't pretend that the dehumanising of people crossing in small boats hasn't happened at the very highest level of government and all over the media. You just can't. I mean, even the word illegal, as you've alluded to, is itself dehumanising. You're no longer a person. You are an illegal. And it's not, I don't think, a particularly callous leap from one to the other. So any other category of children in the United Kingdom who went missing on this scale would draw not as much attention as the submarine story, because the submarine story has blockbuster elements to it, but would draw a hell of a lot more attention than the disappearance of a couple of hundred asylum-seeking children.
I completely. I mean, it makes me sick to my stomach that could well be a possibility. I mean, I think a caller said this earlier, that if this was, let's say, an international tour of school bus or something of Eton children, kids going to Eton College or Harrow or local comprehensive school as well. I think you'd get more. You would get more coverage of Eton or Harrow or the school that I went to, Ampleforth, because you'd have famous parents or wealthy landowners, and for some reason, and this again isn't a criticism; it's just a statement of fact. We are gossip fans. We've always liked the humans like gossip, and so stories involving people that we've heard of are more interesting than stories involving people that we haven't. Well, I mean, there's a reason why soap operas are so popular. Yeah,
exactly. We're just following in on other people's lives. So, I mean, gosh, what if it was a submarine? I don't want to be unduly cynical, but if it was a submarine full of asylum seekers coming across the channel, what sort of coverage, Jimmy makes this point, what sort of coverage would that get? So if you had an almost identical story, but with a completely different demographic of person on the submarine, then I think it would almost certainly prove all of Chris's points. You wouldn't have this sense of a race against time or a desperate a search for humanity, because the humanity of the individuals involved has been compromised. On the one hand, it's nice that Suella Braverman isn't in the news much at the moment, and if you'd like to know why, I'll tell you. More people crossed the channel in small boats this month
than made the journey in June last year. It's currently the 23rd of June, 2023, and already more people have crossed the channel in small boats than they did in June 2022. Now, if, like Chris and like me, you just want these people to be properly processed and looked after, if the process is successful, then that isn't going to keep you awake at night. But if you're a Suella Braverman fan, you're supposed to be gnashing your teeth now and probably wondering why the hell Rishi Sunak less than a month ago was claiming that they'd had great success in this field. It's very, very odd what is happening, but stories like that only matter because the people in the boats have been dehumanised. Therefore, when they go missing, you're not supposed to care. You've been conditioned not to care. Cameron's in Birmingham. Cameron, what would you like to say?
Oh, James, first and foremost, let me say it's a privilege to be going back and forth with a wordsmith such as yourself. But I think there's a couple of different...
Honestly. Go on.
I think there's a couple of different things that we need to pick at here.
Yes.
You can't make people care, James.
No.
You can't make people care, and you've just alluded to it there. And the Titan story, the submersive business, is such an anomalous story wrapped up in such intrigue, and you've got the billionaires and you've got the morbid curiosity. It's clickable, James.
Yeah, great word.
The media are going to push it out there. I mean, Piers did 3.6 million clicks in 24 hours, and that's ridiculous, right? That, for my money, speaks to the human fallacy that people were searching for this content and clicking on it.
And this is why this is not a judgmental conversation in any way, shape or form. Elements of it will be uncomfortable. Chris's contribution highlighting that. But it is just, I mean, it's brutal, actually, Cameron. It's just more interesting.
That's the long and the short of it, James. And you want to do one of these where you're almost putting the mirror up at society, right? This is all that we're doing. If 3.6 million people were searching and watching for this sort of content over the last 24 hours, then that's all that you need to know. Like, it was just a very good story. One of the rare ones that had everything: intrigue, rich people were down there, billionaires.
A countdown, there's a countdown in people's heads as they're watching it, the oxygen running out. What would you do if you were in that situation? Everyone's had that conversation.
James, it's the perfect story, mate. And then you've got the romanticism of the Titanic, the heritage, and what happened so many years ago. It's the perfect
Would
story.
Would that persuade a 15-year-old? Can you remember being 15 and putting the world to rights and convinced of your own moral righteousness? I don't know it would, because a 15-year-old would say, but that's disgusting.
But the question that you pose back to the 15-year-old is, which one of those videos did you watch, 15-year-old? Because I'm sure that 9 times out of 10 they were clicking on the...
I'm sure 9 times out of 10 I came up with one of the 1 out of 10. But also then society's disgusting.
Well, this is the point, James, and how do you cure for the ills of society? You go back to education and all that other stuff, but you can't teach.
No, not in the moment. You're not. I like your opening line. You can't make people care. I nodded along with it. I'm not sure. Do you not think that there could be a higher level of concern about these missing children? If the story had been handled differently, never going to get close to the level of interest in the missing submersive. We can all agree about that. But you could certainly have a lot more interest in 154 missing and potentially exploited children if it was reported differently, no?
Oh, I'd reword your question, James, ever so slightly. We should have a greater level of concern. But again, we're going back to that thing about...
No, we're not. I'm asking you if it could be engendered.
Oh, James, it's... If people aren't clicking on the story, this is the chicken and the egg.
No, but we're doing chicken and egg now, or clicking an egg. That's quite good. Clicking an egg. I think people would. I mean, if you'd had stories about these children in the fortnight after they disappeared, if you'd had pictures, and I think that, I don't know, actually. It's like we're clashing with Chris's point now, that so many people have been conditioned not to care about them because they had come here in small boats. It's interesting.
James, what you're doing then, you're going back to the concept of the other, and this harps back to bloody Wuthering Heights and Heathcliff, right? That's what you're talking about there, James. It's very, very difficult to make people care about, and this is me talking as the son of Jamaican migrants, right? It's very difficult to make people care about people, nameless, anonymous people, that do not look like them. That's you just can't.
Yeah, well, hang on. We just need to qualify the meaning of the word care now, don't we? Because they really care about nameless different people. They care passionately about keeping them out and breaking point and taking back control, but they don't care about them disappearing and possibly being trafficked into criminal gangs and terrible instances of exploitation and the worst. What a great call. Thank you, Cameron. I like this conversation. It's opening up more avenues. I worried at first it might close them down the more we talked about it, but it's opening up more avenues. And remember, the starting point is a 15-year-old, not a 51-year-old ex-newspaper journalist. I get it, but I couldn't quite communicate it to a 15-year-old. I'd probably do a much better job now. And just to pick up on a couple of things, no one is suggesting that it's because the missing children are foreign that we don't care, because, you know, the story about do you remember the cave rescue in Thailand, the schoolboy football team that got lost in caves in Thailand? And there was another story of, I think, a collapsed mine in Chile. This is an astonishing story. And the tale of the plane that came down in the Andes with a Chilean rugby team on board. It's nothing to do with being foreign. It's to do with being refugees or illegals, if you subscribe to different news sources from this program, being illegal people somehow. That is the point here. No, it's nothing to do with them being foreign. It's to do with the dehumanising nature of refugee coverage in this. It's got to be a part of it. No one's going to disagree with that, even if you've fallen for it all, even if you're one of these people, you know, chomping at the bit about it. You're still going to agree that you shouldn't care. What did one of them stand up? Was it Gullis? Stood up in the House of Commons and said, well, they shouldn't have tried to come here anyway. Good God, you sometimes just spot these moments, don't you, marking our national decline. He did, I remember, so House of Commons, shouldn't have come here anyway, or words to that effect. He used to be a teacher.
James O'Brien on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
It is 18 minutes after 11 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Just looking at two stories, or more. I mean, the schoolgirls that went missing in Nigeria, of course, and also the children that are currently missing in this country, and just trying to explain to a non-fictional 15-year-old outraged at the contrast in stories why it happened. And there's no needle here. There's no edge. Some people might be unhappy with the explanation of dehumanisation, but I can live with your unhappiness. I happen to think that it's true. I think that people crossing the channel in small boats have been hugely dehumanised. And if they're not being dehumanised, they're being ignored, because it's failed politically now. Numbers are through the roof. More people already crossed in June 2023 than did in June 2022. So that Stop the Boats pledge, or Suella Braverman's dreams of deporting people, are on ice, at least. But the sheer scale of the coverage makes perfect sense to me. And I was a rubbish tabloid journalist, as I often tell you, really rubbish. But this has got the lot. I just miss being 15 sometimes. I miss that righteous certainty. Do you know what I mean? And knowing what's right and what's wrong, and not making excuses for the cynicism of our society. Well, it's much more like a Hollywood film. And that's the point I missed last night. You can't say to someone, it's more like a Hollywood film, as if that's going to make them less outraged by the contrasting coverage. It actually makes them more outraged. What do you mean it's like a Hollywood? It's not an excuse. This is the news. This is literally the prioritisation of people. Who matters more? Who matters more? And that's the problem. That's the tricky bit here, is that you and I care more, really, about the bigger story than we do about the bigger issue. Benedict's in Chiswick. Benedict, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Hello. Absolute privilege talking to you.
Well, can everyone stop doing that now? It makes me embarrassed, Benedict. Thank you, though. Thank you.
I think the reason why one of these stories is more popular than the other has to do with the outlook of where these stories are going. And you gave some really good examples before the break when you talked about the mine shaft collapse and the cave incident.
The Thai schoolboys in the cave. That was an incredible story. Even Elon Musk got involved in that in a slightly unpleasant way.
Yeah, it was a great story, and you always have this feeling of hope, and there are so many things where this could go, right? Yes. So, like, are they dead? Are they not dead? Are they trapped? And when they're going to be released, there is going to be a huge celebration, and it's going to be a great success for humanity, and all of that. And now we look at the other side, and we look at the kids, and the problem here is, deep down, you know what happened to these kids. Yeah. And I do. And everyone does. And where did it happen? It didn't happen at the bottom of the Atlantic because that's far away. I don't have any power at the bottom of the Atlantic, but it happened on our watch because it happened on the watch of the people who we elected, right? So it happened under our own eyes, right? It happened right here. And that's a really uncomfortable thing.
So we look the other way.
About.
I mean, I guess decent people don't look the other way. Slightly less decent people look the other way with a sense of guilt and shame. And then people like Susan, who's texted, stare the story right in the face, and she says they are here illegally, they shouldn't be here, and that's why we don't care about them. It's a fact. Well, it's clearly a fact in Susan's mind, but obviously in your mind and my mind, they are children. They are not illegals. And also, they're awaiting their asylum application, so it's a factually incorrect fact as well, as well as an emotionally repellent one.
I think that's something the 15-year-old that you had this talk with also deep down understands, and the anger that they are feeling because of that is the anger that you felt in the conversation. I would say probably the anger that they are like the question why.
It's conscience. Why? It's the voice of conscience in a way, isn't
exactly.
It? And we're old and cynical, and we've grown extra layers of emotional protection, and it's also, I mean, it is also more like the mineshaft story. So you could, if you sat here and said, why do we care more about 14 Thai schoolboys missing than 153 children in Dover and Sussex missing? That it's the story, not the people, that matters. Yeah. But you're right. You probably know what's happened to these kids. Some of them will be found with family members, which of course doesn't mean that they haven't been exploited. Some of them will be found in criminal gangs. It's just it's too complicated. It's emotionally nuanced and emotionally complicated, and intellectually nuanced, intellectually complicated, whereas this is a straight binary story. In the best sense of the word binary, it's going to have a happy ending or a tragic ending. There's no nuance. Well, there was a little bit of nuance with people trying to make it about excess wealth and taxation. I just thought that was ill-judged or ill-timed. Thank you, Benedict. Just tell your godchild, Eleni picks up Benedict's point, that they're right, and let them become cynical when they hit 50. Also, I'd be interested to know whether more men than women click on the submarine story. I love reading things like that because I don't know whether I agree. Part of me goes, oh yeah, so would I. And then my internal voice goes, would you really? Why? And I think I don't know why. Do we think women are nicer than men? Then I'd introduce you to that woman a moment ago who really doesn't care about them because you're illegal, aren't they? It's just, would women be more? Is there any way we can find out, Keith? I don't suppose there is there? 25 after 11 is the time. Rose is in Plymouth. Rose, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James.
Hello, Rose.
Well, I agree with virtually everything that's been said, and obviously the refugees are dehumanised.
Yes.
But I think the thing about the submersible was that it's a very, very immediate story, and above all, certainly for me, it was the sheer appalling horror of the idea of them slowly asphyxiating.
Yes.
Which is what they would have done.
So that's what I meant by imagining what you'd do. You could you can't really imagine being a 15-year-old Albanian teenager who's disappeared from a asylum centre in Sussex, but you can absolutely imagine being stuck in a submersible in the North Atlantic, watching the oxygen levels deplete, can't you?
Yes, I mean it's beyond horror, and it was happening then. The thing about the poor little kids is they're all scattered. We've no idea where they are. If it had been picked up at the outset,
yes, and
some journalists had gone into it.
They tried, but it's not going to get the coverage. If it had been reported like an abduction, like a mass abduction, and the numbers and the faces were right out there.
Yeah. I mean, when they are rehumanized, like that poor little soul, in his best clothes, dead on a beach.
Yeah.
Alan, somebody, wasn't it, years ago? Then everybody's interested.
For a news cycle or two.
Well, yes, exactly. And you can't get around the way the refugees have been absolutely systematically dehumanised. I mean, that is obvious and
strange for a Christian country. Thank you, Rose. And Adam, I think probably the last word on this is in Paris. Adam, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. So I'm a first-time caller, so go easy on me, yeah?
Of course.
So I'm going to express an opinion here that you probably don't hear on your radio show quite a lot, and that is James. I'm a little bit racist.
Okay.
So, and not in an overtly way, but I'm a little bit racist by way of my upbringing, by way of my environment when I was little, where I grew up, and it affects by way of the media that I consume, by way of the television that I see, and it affects me in small ways, in things that I do in my daily life, the way I perceive certain things, the way I perceive certain situations.
Let me nudge you along to how it influenced your response to this story, if I can.
So when you see a story like this, there is an inherent level of racism which is part of your psyche. And
but the men on the submarine, two of them were Pakistani British, one of them was French, and the other one was, I think, Canadian. So why are you telling me about how racist you are?
How racist I am.
Well, sorry, that came out about. Why are you telling me about your racism in the context of this story, given the demographics of the people on the submarine?
Because this is a story about people from different cultures, different parts of the world, and it's much easier to identify.
But so are the people on the boat
with Anglo cultures.
But so are the people on the submarine.
And it's much easier, as you already said, to identify yourself with a story which comes out of an Anglo-Saxon culture, an American environment,
he was French.
An American company.
He's French and British Pakistani.
Yes, but it's being carried in the English-speaking press, coming from an American environment.
It'll be in the French-speaking press as well, won't it?
Not so much. You would have thought so, but not quite so much.
It's not really racism, is it, that we're talking about here? It's about it's the dehumanizing of the refugees, because we were every bit as fascinated in the Thai schoolboys that were stuck in the caves. We were every bit as fascinated by the Chilean miners that were stuck down the mine. So I mean, I hope you feel better after getting that off your chest, but I don't think your low-level racism has got anything to do with the responses to this story. There's probably racism involved in not caring about the refugee children, but that's more to do with the refugee status than their ethnicity. Obviously, because of the Thai schoolboys and the Chilean miners, and the French and British Pakistani people on the submarine.
Yeah, well, the two stories are obviously linked, and I'm specifically talking here about the reaction in between the two, the difference in reaction between the two stories, between the media consumption of the two stories.
Yes.
And there's a lot of other things that affect it. Obviously, there's the intrigue behind it, the questioning of how it happened, what can be done about it.
We know all that. We know all that. I mean, clearly, it is just a better story. Normally, I'm more than happy to see racism introduced into analysis of things, but it doesn't quite work on this occasion. It's more of the difference between refugee status and non-refugee status children in the context, perhaps, of the Thai caving expedition, or the. I mean, the news values are undebatable. It is just a much easier story to tell and a much easier story to follow. I'll leave you with a thought. What if they'd been Ukrainian children? Just leave you with that thought, that had gone missing in this country after arriving here. 11:30 is the time. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
This is LBC with James O'Brien. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
11:34 is the time. Here's a text. I am shocked that on this anniversary and with all the emerging discontent that James O'Brexit is wasting his time with the mayor and the Titanic story that we are all bored with. It's very disappointing. Britons who want to rejoin the EU is at its highest level since 2016, according to the latest surveys. Well, your wish is my command. It's not as high as some people might have expected, or perhaps more accurately hoped. And I'll tell you what is interesting. Headlines are interesting, aren't they? Because I think that these two headlines are referring to the same stories. One is in the Times, which was actually pro remain, albeit that Rupert Murdoch always does that. He always hedges his bets. His own personal feelings on the subject were pretty clear. But the same survey prompting different headlines. The Times goes with most Leavers still believe Brexit will turn out well, whereas The Guardian goes with few Leave voters think Brexit has gone well. And they're both drawing on exactly the same analysis, and they're both quite correct as headlines. And yet they are, if you like, two rather different stories, aren't they? Which one are you drawn to most? Few Leave voters think Brexit has gone well, or most Leave voters still believe? It's like a Cher tribute act, Brexit now, isn't it? I still believe. You just need a vocoder. Or most Leavers still believe Brexit will turn out well. Of course they do. If I'd voted for it, I'd still tell people that I think it would turn out well. I'd certainly not be telling anyone it was my fault it's turned out badly. I'd be adamant that there's a brilliant Brexit out there. It just goes to a different school. If, God forbid, I was Nigel Farage, I'd be absolutely insistent that if only I had been in charge with my long track record of, my long track record of things. If I had been in charge, Brexit would have gone brilliantly. And of course, if I had encouraged you to vote for it in this job, I probably would. By now, I'd be telling you to just stop talking about it now and move on. I don't think I'd be. Well, I couldn't, could I? Because if I'd been pro Brexit, pro May, pro Johnson, pro Truss briefly, and pro Rishi Sunak, if I was tickling the tummy of all four of those individuals and Brexit itself, then I don't think I could claim it could have gone well, because I didn't just get the Brexit that I asked for and told you to vote for. I also got 4 prime ministers that I told you that I wanted or told you that I favoured, or certainly 3. I might have taken a couple of weeks off on Liz Truss, to be honest with you. But the idea of Johnson being prime minister, if I told you that was the stuff of my dreams, then I don't think I could sit here now and say there is a brilliant Brexit, but it goes to a different school, because I had been blowing smoke up Boris Johnson's backside for his entire premiership, and he told me that I told you that he'd got Brexit done. So I think it's quite hard to imagine. It's fine for Farage. Farage was always a heckler, always lobbing rotten tomatoes at the people with the difficult jobs to do. And then you've got client journalists, which are different from hecklers. Client journalists are the ones that actually tell their readers what the politicians want their readers to read. So you have that very, very strange situation where people that are supposed to be speaking truth to power are actually doing PR for power. And that, I don't think, has ever been worse than it was when Boris Johnson and Brexit collided. I think it's not much of a silver lining, but I think things are getting better now. I think they kind of have to. But if I'd been on that tip, I think now I would have 2 choices. I would either come clean with you and say that I made a terrible mistake, and then we could have some really interesting phone-ins about why. How did we fall for it? How did we end up thinking that we'd have more money by now, or cheaper food, or a stronger pound, or whatever it was, or shorter waiting lists? What would it be? I don't know. So I could either come clean with you and file it under better late than never, but I'm admitting my mistake and I'm telling you the truth now. Probably not ready to do that about Boris Johnson yet, but at least we can do it about Brexit. Or I'd be telling you to move on and stop talking about it, and I'd be lying to you again that nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Well, if you don't care, you are very silly. And then Question Time last night, which most of you won't have watched, I didn't, was an interesting exercise. Marking the 7th anniversary of the vote, the audience consisted entirely of Leave voters, some of whom will have changed their mind, as Fiona Bruce explained during the introduction, but many of whom won't. And what is interesting about the polling that has sort of coincided with that programme, carried out by Public First to coincide with the 7th anniversary of that referendum, Leave voters had significant regrets, but they still tended to blame politicians for its failure and hoped that the situation could improve. So what intrigued me most last night? Well, 2 things. One's journalistic rather than societal. The journalistic, but I can't believe they still let the audience members say things that are just ridiculous. There was a woman in the audience, I don't know if you saw it. Did you see it? Should we play it? Can we get the clip, actually, of the woman talking about French and German people on roofs? I got so many messages. I didn't watch it myself last night. I was too busy discussing the submarine story with my godchild. I got so many messages last night, my Twitter, saying, I think this is one of your old joking that it was the kind of bilge that we used to hear on this programme a lot in the immediate aftermath of the Brexit vote, when we started talking a lot about what people were going to do and what they were most looking forward to and what laws that were going to be abolished. And we had some absolute crackers, didn't we? I think the ones people remember most, there was a fella someone had told him that they were going to abolish 3-pin plugs. And so he'd voted for Brexit in order to save the 2-pin plugs. And there was a lovely lady who thought that she'd be able to wrap her fish and chips in newspaper again, which is gross when you look back on it, really. And anyway, I'm pretty sure that when we were kids, you had a layer of clean paper, and then the newspaper was wrapped around the clean paper, wasn't it? But apparently it was worth voting to leave the biggest single market on the planet so that you could wrap your dinner in someone else's manky old newspaper. But I mean, I'm sure they didn't really mean that. It's just that people would ring this programme convinced that, well, it would be like most other phone-in programmes, and you'd be able to say something like, I can't wait to leave because we won't have to obey all those laws anymore. And the presenter would go, yeah, me too. Can't wait for that. Instead of saying, oh, which laws is that then? So it would end up like that. And this woman on Question Time, who would have put her hand up and asked to speak, ended up talking about people on roofs. And then another fella, straight out of Central Casting, came on and said that he had watched people arrive in this country and go straight to the benefit centre. Now, everyone needs a hobby, but to let that go I mean, possibly it's true. How does that work? What do you do? Do you hang around at arrivals at Heathrow? Who do you decide who to follow? So you're at arrivals at Heathrow. How do you know that these people aren't holiday mate? I mean, actually, get me that clip as well, please. Can we have both of those clips? The person on roofs and the bloke, because that's the bit. And Fiona Bruce has an impossible job to do when she's doing Question Time. Absolutely impossible. And the format of Question Time is not that. The presenter pushes back against people in the audience, which is why I often find it so frustrating. You have someone there saying, I've watched them. I've literally watched them arrive in this country and go straight to the benefits office. And you think, oh, blimey, that's bad. And then you think, hang on a minute. You can't possibly have done that. Well, I mean, just think about logistically what that would involve. And the fact that you can still say that on live live-ish national television in the context of this conversation, that's the problem in a nutshell. Because that going unchallenged in pubs is why Brexit happened. That going unchallenged on the BBC is why Brexit happened. And that still going unchallenged on the BBC is why most leavers still believe Brexit will turn out well. I'm just trying to imagine what that would actually involve. Trying to sort of see. So you're at Heathrow, or maybe you're at Dover. Are you watching people get off ferries, or are you at, where is it, St Pancras for the Eurostar? Well, anyway, you go somewhere where people are arriving from continental Europe. You can tell somehow the ones that aren't on holiday. I know they haven't got a bucket and spade. So the ones that arrive at Heathrow without a bucket and spade are not, clearly they're not on holiday. So you've got 500 people coming towards you, arrivals at Heathrow. Apparently you can tell by looking which ones aren't British. Spanish, yep. Portuguese, Polish, yep. So this fella here, I'll play you his words in a minute. You've got then the calculation on which one is most, because a lot of them might be swinging the lead, some of them might be looking for work, some of them might already live here, but you've somehow got the ability to tell which one has A, just arrived, B, not come on holiday, C, not already got a job here or intending D, to find a job, E, not hang on, let's run through that again. He's not just not British. I mean, not actually, you can tell they're not British, you can tell they've come from a European country, you can tell they're not on holiday, you can tell that they have no intention of looking for a job, and you can tell that they are intending to head immediately upon arrival to the benefits office. So that's at least 5 almost psychic insights that this fella's possessed of. And then he picks one to follow. On several occasions, he correctly picks the one that is going to go directly from Heathrow to the benefits office. I mean, it's a long time since I signed on. A long time. I think you needed an address. Or at least, maybe things have changed. But which benefits office would you go to? And where would you sleep that night? And that's the problem, really. So, also, I think it's all been online since about 2011, but these people are still out there. Which one do you want to hear first, Roof Lady or Benefits Man? Hands up for Roof Lady. Hands up for Benefits Man. Benefits Man it is then.
One of the reasons I voted to leave was to manage our own borders and stop people coming into this country as and when they felt like it. I've seen people entering this country and going straight down to the benefits office. That's what I have seen in the course of my employment.
Right. He hasn't, has he? 11:46 is the time. The question that I'm going to ask you, and I want you to have a proper think about this, and these shows are always upside down when Sadiq Khan comes in at 10 o'clock. It's always a slightly, and we launch topics not on the top of the hour. I like to challenge myself, set the bar high, but I can tell you now, you've probably got a better chance of getting through on a Brexit-related subject today than you will. I think you need a national insurance number to sign on as well, don't you? Do you need a national insurance number? Anyway, I digress. Why do you think the government, and remember, this is a government that was elected on a promise to get Brexit done. Every single member of the cabinet claimed that Boris Johnson had got Brexit done. Boris Johnson, of course, talked about sunlit uplands. People like David Davis talked about there being no downsides, only incredible upsides. Government minister after government minister after government minister queued up right up until the 2019 general election to tell you that it would go brilliantly. And then afterwards, they told you that it was going brilliantly. They insist that it was a good idea. They insist that it is going well. They insist that it was worth doing. So here is my question for you. Okay? Why did the Get Brexit Done government refuse, is the verb that I'm going to use, to put a minister on Question Time last night, to put a senior minister on Question? They offered someone called Anthony Mangnall, and I suspect he was desperately relieved when the BBC said no. They ended up with John Redwood instead, which is, talk about Hobson's choice. But Sophie's choice, actually, isn't it? Not Hobson. No, Hobson's choice. A parliamentary private secretary in the Treasury that most people have never heard of. Why would the government not want to put a major Brexiteer on Question Time last night? That's the question that I want you to answer. We might change the question slightly. We might move the territory slightly, but that is the thing that interests me most, because that is a question that anyone can answer, regardless of where you sit, how you voted, or what you think. Why would this government, elected on a promise to get Brexit done, rammed to the rafters with people who voted for it and insisted it was a good idea? The ones who didn't vote it are now, of course, insisting that it was a good idea. Jeremy Hunt selling slices of his soul every day at the moment by trying to talk about the economic situation that the country is in without mentioning the Brexit that he voted against. I mean, it's actually incredible. Again, one of those moments where you realise it's all in plain sight, but it's utterly bonkers. Jeremy Hunt, fairly persuasive Remainer, just like Liz Truss used to be, actually, but now trying to analyse the state of inflation, for example, without mentioning Brexit. It's just ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. The rest of them, ardent Brexiteers, they would once have called themselves. Why would none of them want to go on Question Time? Have a think, because you might be able to shout an obvious answer, but it's not going to make for an interesting phone call. Why would the government... Actually, let's make it about Rishi Sunak. You know, tough guy, tough Rishi. Why would Rishi Sunak not send a senior minister to do Question Time last night? A really big edition, a huge edition, with an audience, and this is important, full of Leave voters. Every single person in the audience told the BBC that they had voted Leave. So it's a bit like an open top bus tour after winning the FA Cup, isn't it? You'd have thought. 7 years in, an audience entirely of our supporters, who you'd be fighting over it. Grant Shapps would be pushing people out the way, wouldn't he, to get that gig? I'll do it, says Rishi Sunak. I'll take this one. I know the Prime Ministers don't usually go on Question Time, but this is a biggie. Come on. It's an audience full of our supporters, and it's 7 years since we won. This is it. So much winning. Who else is in the case? So hard to remember, isn't it, these days? Therese Coffey, she'd be up for it, wouldn't she? Why weren't they fighting like rats in a sack to get the seat on Question Time for the 7th anniversary in an audience full of supporters. Be incredible. Be like a home fixture. Be like Steven Gerrard walking into Anfield. Why would they not do it? And I'll take any answer you've got. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. If you voted for it, I think in some ways I'd be even more interested in your answer than if you didn't. But there is the question, right? 7 years in, they got Brexit done. They got all the big calls right. We're in the sunlit uplands. And here, thanks to the BBC, is a studio audience consisting only of people who voted in the way that you wanted them to 7 years ago today in 2016. Why would Rishi Sunak's cabinet not want to be in that room? 0345 6060 973.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC with James O'Brien.
11:54 is the time. It's a strange one, isn't it? The question prompted by last night's Question Time. Not something we often do, but on this occasion, I think it's important. The government failed to offer up a senior minister. A Brexit-built government, a government that wouldn't exist without Brexit, a prime minister that voted for Brexit, a cabinet that is unanimously supportive of Brexit. Not long ago, they were claiming Boris Johnson had got it done and that he'd got all the big calls right. Why would none of them want to be on Question Time last night? And why would Rishi Sunak not force a senior member of government to go and defend and explain the policy success that propelled him into Downing Street in the first place? I'm not asking a question I already know the answer to, as one friendly critic has suggested, because I want to know what your answer is. I might have my own answer. I'll share it shortly, but I'm more interested in what your answer is to that question. Peter's in Wigan. Peter, what have you got?
Hi, James. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome.
It's because it's harder and harder and harder by the day for them to just keep pumping out the same lies they have done for so many years, because for years and years and years our politicians have blamed everything that's wrong with the country, from housing to infrastructure to neglected areas, on the EU. Now we're not in the EU and all them things are still going wrong, even worse so actually since we left the EU. They can't blame the EU anymore. They try, some of them, like Redwood was last night, but they can't do that anymore. They have to start telling the truth, because now
What did Redwood? Did you watch it? Did you watch it last night?
I didn't watch it all.
No, don't worry.
Lots of the clips.
No, I'm much more interested in the stuff that didn't happen than the stuff that did. But Redwood's out to lunch, isn't he, really? I mean, some of the stuff he posts on Twitter is beyond parody.
It's absolutely madness. I mean, especially as I was about to say, we can all see with our own eyes now what life is like outside the EU.
Let me stop. No. Let me stop you there, Peter.
Go on.
We can. It's far too early.
Yes, it's really not too early.
It's far too early. At least 50 years, possibly 100 before we can get a proper...
Don't that makes me so angry. I tell you. I worked for a small logistics company for over a decade, and I lost that job because the company went under because of Brexit, because of the pressures it put on staff shortages and the costs added on. And yeah, I have had wage rises as a lorry driver,
yes,
but they, like within a week of them going up, they're cancelled out by the prices going high in the shops, and the prices going high in the shops to pay for our wage rises, which is why I think a massive proportion of inflation in the UK is because of Brexit, because it's
and you've got a chancellor of the
extra costs.
We've got a chancellor of the Exchequer who voted against Brexit. Now trying to explain. I saw a thread on Twitter this morning trying to explain inflation without referencing Brexit, which is. Sometimes
it's absolutely crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I say the words out loud and I can't quite believe them, Peter. It doesn't happen as much as it used to. But you've got a Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who knew it was a bad idea, campaigned against it, is now in charge of managing some of the damage that's been done by it. But when he explains what he is trying to do, he can't mention one of the major causes of the problems that his job is to fix. I mean, it is just incredible.
It is incredible. And you've got all people like Farage at the moment suddenly coming out today saying if we have to fight Brexit again, we will. And the reason I'm saying that is because they know they're going to have to. Because Rejoin has got the momentum.
No, he's doing what he always does, mate. He's just trying to attract a little bit of attention to his Tin Pot grift. There's no realistic prospect of a vote to get back in the next 10, 15 years, I don't think.
I have to argue against that.
I hope you're right. It'd be the first time I've ever been wrong about Brexit, but I'd be more than happy.
That makes me nervous, to be honest, James. But can I really quickly say, and I hope you don't hate me for this, but I'm the person organising the National Rejoin March in September this year, and we're expecting it to be huge on the 23rd of September. And it was massive last year, the first one we had, and we're going to do it every year because the goal is to put Rejoin on the agenda and keep it there till we've rejoined, no matter how long it takes.
Love it.
And honestly, the movement is growing massively, and that's why you've got people like Farage talking about it.
Yeah, maybe you're right. I hope you are right. I love that, though, because I wonder how the Daily Mail are going to portray you as a lorry driver from Wigan as yet another example of James O'Brien's metropolitan liberal elite.
Do you know what?
What?
I use that. I'm clever. I scraped my GCSEs. I'm certainly not liberal elite, and I love using that because I'm clever enough to know that whenever I put a post up about it, I always get, oh look, the liberal elite here, and I love letting them know that actually I'm a lorry driver who used to be in the army, mate. So do what.
Good man. Well, listen, I hope you're ahead of me on this one. I really do, for obvious reasons, which could be loosely filed under patriotism. As a military veteran, you'll know exactly what the proper stuff looks like, as opposed to the kind that Farage peddles. I mean, some answers are obvious, like Peter's, that it is indefensible. But if Brexit is indefensible, which is the only message I can take away from the fact that they wouldn't put anyone on to defend it, if it's indefensible, why are we not trying to repair it, fix it, or improve it? I mean, it's actually incredible. Unless you've got a better answer to the question of why Rishi Sunak wouldn't put a minister on Question Time last night, to an episode dedicated entirely to Brexit, which propelled him and Boris Johnson and Liz Truss into Downing Street, and an audience full of supporters.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It's 3 minutes after 12. Come on, James, says Kenny in Liverpool. Put the woman on the roof clip. Oh, all right, I will. So I've got 3 clips. You've heard one of them. We call him Benefits Man. And then we've got Roof Lady. And then we've got Red Wood. And I want to know who embarrassed themselves most last night. And I think you get a head start if you're on the panel. You shouldn't be judging the audience as harshly as you judge the panel, should you? Because it's not their job to know what they're talking about. But my goodness me, there's knowing what you're talking about. And then there's Roof Lady.
To say is the reason that I wanted to come out of Brexit was because we seemed to keep to all of the rules and many foreign countries didn't. I'm just talking about people that go up on roofs, for one thing. We kept, when they brought the rules in about the safety guards, we took that on board. But when you went to France or Germany or something, they were all up on their roofs with nothing. And we were paying the cost of having to do it the right way, and they weren't. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I voted to come out.
I mean, where do you start with that? What is it? Do you think a dodgy builder told her that the reason why it was going to cost so much to fix her roof was because of those pesky EU regulations? And then, because that's all I've got. Well, the French don't even follow them, love. The French and the Germans are up and down their roofs like you wouldn't believe, but we've got to use scaffolding and safety nets and helmets. Have you any idea how much helmets cost? It's all the EU, love. It's all the pesky EU. I honestly have... Keith had to listen to that twice to work out what was going on. I honestly don't know what the hell is going on there. I mean, so that's choice number 2. Should we have another listen to Benefits Boy? I'm going to do a vote on this one. Here's Benefits Boy. And remember, what you have to ask yourself here is how? How? So with him, it's how? And with Roof Lady, it's what? Where? What? So how for this guy? What for her? And then Redwood, which will just be like... So here's Benefits Boy.
One of the reasons I voted to leave was to manage our own borders and stop people coming into this country as and when they felt like it. I've seen people entering this country and going straight down to the benefits office. That's what I have seen in the course of my employment.
Okay. And this is the third contender for who made sort of plum of the week. Who made the biggest fool of themselves on question? I am going to take some calls, don't worry. There's one phone line free if you're quick, 0345 6060 973. And this is the bloke that ended up essentially being the most senior Tory Brexiter on the panel, John Redwood.
In 2019, you were elected on a manifesto that said there would be a quick trade deal with the United States of America. So where is it?
Well, I didn't say that.
And it's very helpful that the new president thinks he can help fast-track a free trade agreement over and above World Trade Organization terms to improve the flows of UK-US trade. The US is already our single biggest country trading partner. And it's a successful trade, pretty even both ways.
Obviously, there's a juxtaposition there. There's what he said last night, and there is what he said in 2019. Oh, so I play you that because I think it's part of the answer to the question of why wouldn't Rishi Sunak send a minister? Why wouldn't ardent Brexiteer Rishi Sunak send a minister to appear on Question Time last night? Sam in Horsham says, I think I need to hear that lady again, James. It's not just Keith. All right. So here's Roof Lady.
To say is the reason I wanted to come out of Brexit was because we seemed to keep to all of the rules and many foreign countries didn't. I'm just talking about people that go up on roofs, for one thing. We kept, when they brought the rules in about the safety guards, we took that on board. When you went to France or Germany or something, they were all up on their roofs with nothing, and we were paying the cost of having to do it the right way, and they weren't. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I voted to come out.
I am going to let that one go. Actually, I want you to try and tell me what you think is going on in her head, because I genuinely. Tasnin, I'm sorry about your iced coffee. Tasnin's been in touch to say I owe her an iced coffee after she spat it all out while listening to my reactions to some of these clips. But I mean, how? What do you think happened there? Right there with that lady? Because the old benefits, God, that was the closest I've come in a while to swearing on the radio. Because it was so alliteration. The old benefits, yeah, not that word. The old benefits rubbish. We've heard that a million times before. I am James O. Brexit. I've never heard the German roofs thing. But how do you think she ended up thinking that it would be a good idea to leave the European Union because German roofers don't follow the rules that British roofers have to? I mean, even if it were true, what would leave it? She wants British roofers to have less safety measures in place. What do you want? I want more deaths on British building sites. When do you want them? Now. So she's crossed 7 years later. There haven't been more deaths on British building sites because presumably we haven't relaxed any health and safety regulations in the construction. So what do you think? What do you think she's talking about? Genuine question. Couple of phone lines. We'll do that as a side order. And then we might take a vote on who embarrassed themselves more in the course of last night's programme, which none of us watched. Toby's in Bristol. Toby, why wouldn't they send a senior minister?
Because they don't want to talk about it, and by not talking about it, they don't have to have a plan, because neither Labour or the Tories have a plan. So they won't talk about it. There's a blank refusal, which you see on all their faces, is so they don't have to address it, because that means they don't have to come up with an answer. Just your last one, it does seem like an awful lot of these people, it's all anecdotal. You missed out the lady with the straight banana who was going to vote Remain until she went into the supermarket and she was confronted by a straight banana, and that was enough to tip her to vote.
That wasn't last night, was it? That's an old one.
Yeah, well, that could be an older one, but it definitely
no, there was some.
No,
I don't know if that was last night. Martin from Chester's. up on that as well. She was going to vote Remain until she went into the supermarket the night before and saw a straight banana. And I mean, I still see people saying, "Oh well, everyone's so sneering and condescending. No wonder you lost the vote." How are you supposed to respond to people like that?
You can't. It's impossible because they use it. It's back to what you said many occasions. It's all based on feeling.
Yeah.
So they pick up an idea of somebody's bad experience, like the lady who maybe went on a holiday to France and was disgusted by the building quality.
But
country.
But why? How would leaving the European Union change the building qualities in France?
But it wouldn't. That's the whole point, though. But she's been wound up by somebody's anecdotal piece, possibly online.
I think it's a dodgy builder telling her that the reason why he's charging her through the nose is because of all those EU rules. And do you know what's even worse? They don't even follow them in France. How much time has she spent on German building sites?
And the depressing thing is we wrote half of the rules. Our health and safety inspectorate created these rules, and we wrote half of the conventions that we follow because the European Union recognised the fact that the UK were really good at creating laws and drafting them. And one of our specialities, they would bring them to us so that we could make them better, so we could word them better, make them more substantial.
Listen. I know, but you're preaching to the choir now. I know that. Most people listening to this know that. But the government, how long are they going to get away with this for? How long are they going to be? I think I found Banana Woman. She was from 2017, but it's worth having a listen.
Apologies.
No, it's fine.
Apologies.
We haven't done this for years. It's worth having a little listen, isn't it? To mark the anniversary, we should have seen this coming. We could have put together the greatest hits of Brexit. But how long can they get away with?
Can I just say that I will be? Can I just say that I will? Oh, sorry.
No, of course you can.
I will be on the march. I was on the first one, the first Rejoin march, which was massively ignored. I think there's about 50,000 people, which compared to the million that turned out for the second referendum, was pretty small beer. But still, it was still a start, and I will be there on the 23rd of September. I think he said, or whenever they get me date. I'll be there, and I'll be there until we're back in.
Yeah, and because it is a matter of patriotic passion, really, or pragmatic obviousness. I don't know how long they can get away with this. So bizarre, isn't it? As I say, if I did this, if I had used my platform here to encourage people to vote in that way, I would be desperate for the conversation to be over. But that's just a little bit professionally pathetic for a journalist. For an actual politician or cabinet member, it's a dereliction of duty. It's an epic dereliction of duty. I could just say, oh, it's all over now, no one cares about it, and still have a huge audience. Then I'm not actually derelicting, is that a word? I'm not actually being derelict in my duty. I've still, my job is to get people to listen to this radio programme. So I'm still doing my job. What is Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak's job? By not talking about Brexit. When did it change? When did it go from saying it's all brilliant or get Brexit? When did it go? I didn't notice. No one told me. I didn't get the memo. They go from talking about sunlit uplands and what was it? Quite recently, they were still talking about free ports. I had to sit in Clacton-on-Sea explaining to people why free ports. When did it stop? Anyway, why do they keep bottling it? 0345 6060 973. Pete thinks that Roof Lady might have been watching Auf Wiedersehen Pet on UK Gold. I think it's called Gold now, isn't it? I'm not sure, but that's not a bad call, actually. What on earth was going on in that woman's head is a question that I would invite your answers to. But the broader inquiry this hour is, of course, why would the government not put up a minister on the 7th anniversary of Brexit in an audience, before an audience, packed to the rafters with people they persuaded to vote for it in 2016? It's 12:15.
James O'Brien on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
And now, by popular demand, I don't think I must have missed this at the time. It's an oldie but a goldie. Not from last night. We've had Roof Lady. You've heard from Benefits Boy. Redwood has humiliated himself once again on the public stage. No consequences at all for people like John Redwood. The question we're asking, if you're just joining us, is why? 0345 6060 why? No, but why though? Why? Why didn't Rishi Sunak put a minister on Question Time last night? But seeing as this has been alluded to by a few people, I thought I'd treat you to a little taste of Banana Woman.
I was voting Remain, and at the very last minute I changed my decision and I went to Leave. And the reason because of that is because of I go to a supermarket and a banana is straight. I'm just sick of the silly rules that come out of Europe. And
have the bananas changed?
If you go to Aldi, they're a bit bent.
It was bananas, what did it, was it, for you?
No, it was more than bananas. It's the fact that there's opportunities out there that I feel that we need to see as a country.
And you're optimistic now? You're pleased the way you voted?
I am pleased the way I'm...
That was from 2017, not 2023. And do you know who invented the lies about bendy bananas? It's almost like this is scripted, isn't it, by, I don't know, the Coen brothers. Boris Johnson, I think. Certainly the huge majority of lies told about European Union rules and then filed back to Britain were filed by Boris Johnson. So there it is. Roof lady, banana woman, benefits boy, and Redwood. Peter is in Castro in Italy. Peter, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello, James. How are you doing again?
I'm pretty good.
Yeah, well, in answer to your question, I mean, I think it's embarrassment on the part of ministers. I think they were used to debating across the table on Newsnight with people like yourself or indeed any other people they can label as investors Remainers. And so I'm in the same category. They label us as being deluded and
and it worked for a while. It worked for a while.
The Remain pill.
Yes.
But the difference is when they're confronted with people like there was a man in particular in the audience whose business had been very badly damaged by Brexit.
Yes.
And he made the case very strongly. And he voted leave and he felt cheated. He felt he'd been let down by people like John Redwood and Ben Habib. And to look him in the eye, I think would have been painful for a minister because they are going to have to confront the fact that here's somebody who was on their side and the facts have caught up with them. And now they're having to admit that this person actually was not a convinced Remainer. He became one because he was confronted with reality.
Well, he must have voted for Brexit. If he was in the audience, he must have voted for it. And then his own company went up down the tubes, did it? Or started struggling?
That's the point. It's people like that. It's people like that who are powerful. Because, you have on your show, you call for people to phone in and say how it's affected them, why they changed their minds. And he made the case very well. Now, I think, having said that the programme makers were deluded. Because, I mean, initially I thought, well, you could have a studio full of Remainers and still maintain balance. What you have to do is have 50-50 people who...
52-48. 52-48.
Well, no, exactly.
Well, I disagree with you on that. I thought... I was asked to go on it. I think I've mentioned that. And I was 52-48. I don't normally like doing those programmes for a fairly selfish reason, which is I don't get to call them liars. I'd present it, but I don't want to be a panellist on it because I don't want it, I'd come across as unbearable if I had to say to the person in the audience that's not true, or I had to say to the other panellist that's not true, you're lying. It's a false equivalence, if you like. But on this occasion, I nearly did it, and I quite liked the idea of an all-leave audience because they're in some ways the only people whose opinions are interesting anymore. I mean, an audience full of people who've been proved right isn't very interesting. An audience full of people who've been proved wrong and are in the process of realising and or admitting it is much more fertile territory, isn't it?
Well, and they could have had you on the programme.
They could, but I didn't fancy it.
Sense was Alistair Campbell. I mean, of the two people, obviously there are two extreme Brexiteers there, Ben Habib and John Redwood, both of whom...
Was Ben Habib was one of Farage's people, was he?
Well,
was he in Farage's party?
He was. He was MEP before, and he's actually extremely far to the right of even the. Well,
he's not here. I don't.
But,
yeah, I mean, you can say that, but no more. Don't say anything rude.
But having said no, far from it. But I mean, he said what we knew he was going to say, and the two other panelists who were Jenny Chapman from Labour and Annan Menon were in the middle. So I mean, this is not balanced. But having said that, had the BBC brought in an equal balance of people who voted leave and changed their minds, and those who continued to believe in leave, that would have been perfectly plausible.
Yeah, but they reflected...
That would have been balanced.
But I don't know, actually. They reflected, because not that many people are ready to admit that they made a mistake yet. Most leavers still believe that Brexit will turn out well. So I thought that they tried to weight the audience according to where the conversation is at the moment, where the polling is. But again, there's a big question to be asked about whether or not that's healthy. At what point does evidence and reality take more priority than polling? But then, of course, I suppose you can argue about what evidence and reality actually is. 18% of people who voted leave in 2016 believe that Brexit has been
a success, 18%. But, crucially, 61% think it will turn out well in the end, including, presumably, Roof Lady, Benefits Boy, Banana Woman and Red Wood. All four of them, no doubt, would insist that there is a great Brexit. It either goes to a different school or is just around the corner. Mike, thank you, Peter. Mike's in Whetstone. Mike, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I am calling about Roof Lady.
Yes.
I think that she has inadvertently stumbled upon something that's actually a really important point. I think she's used a terrible example, because quite why you would want people to be less safe, I don't know.
Yes.
But I think that there was always this sense among British people of the EU as an oppressor, of telling us what to do, and British people don't like being told what to do. And I think what she's trying to get across is that in other European countries, they don't pay that much attention.
Which makes it a UK problem, not an EU problem.
Oh, it is, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
not even. I don't think it's true either.
Well, my wife, who you know, grew up in Belgium. She has told me very often about the way the Belgian attitude is towards the EU.
Take a much lighter touch regulation.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
they don't. There'll be EU regulation, and the Belgians will either, if they agree with it, they'll do it, and if they don't, they'll just ignore it. And they don't. In Britain, we have this sense that if we're being told what to do because I'm
going to push you for examples now.
I know you're going to push me for examples,
and you're not going to have any.
Explain where she's coming from.
I've heard the perception expressed like this before, but in what areas do we follow the rules more closely than other countries do? Even if it were true, you'd need to be able to say. I don't think there are any, really.
Maybe it's not a specific. It's actually about specific rules, but I think it's about perception.
Yes, it is about perception.
It's the British perception that we don't like to be pushed around, but we have
it's proof that it's nonsense. Is that the best thing she can come up with? What's she calling for, do you think, Mike? Was she calling for British builders to be less safe or German builders to be more safe?
She hasn't thought it through. I think is the problem.
No.
But if you pushed her on it, she would probably say that she doesn't want anybody to be less safe, but she wants us to be able to make the rules. She doesn't want us to be told what the rules are by somebody else.
I guess it could be that, but quite how you end up drawing comparisons between British building sites and German building sites is anybody's guess. You're onto something, although I still subscribe more to my idea that it was a cowboy builder justifying his ludicrously inflated prices by claiming that it was all the fault of the EU. And I'll tell you what's even worse, love, those Germans, they don't even bother obeying it. I find that unlikely. Neil's in South Hams. Neil, what's going on?
Good afternoon, James. I'm one of Anthony Magnall's constituents.
Okay.
He is a Brexiteer. He is a Rishi Sunak fanboy, and he is a PPS. So, under the ministerial code, he can't criticise the government. So, in all fairness, that's why they would have offered him up. He could have been a casualty, and nobody would have batted an eyelid, to be honest.
Yeah.
But that's ultimately why they've done it. They're not going to put, because they know if they put a senior minister up on a programme like this, and you've got Campbell there, it's just going to tear him a new one. Like he did with Redwood, and Redwood's easy to to pull apart, and I'm not convinced whether he's just ignorant or too stupid to understand what's happening around him.
It's a question for the ages.
Isn't it just? So that's why Magnall was put up.
Should they have taken him instead of Redwood? Should someone actually with, albeit a relatively tenuous link to the government, carried more weight than John Redwood, who has a tenuous link with reality?
Yeah, I mean, he got in 2019 with just shade under 13,000 majority, which is a dip on the 18,000 majority which Sarah Wollaston had, who was opposing him as a Lib Dem in Totnes. And that may be a reason why he lost, 5,000 or so seats. But he is very much, he's certainly within local Conservatives, he is very much, thought of as a rising star within the party.
So it might have been illustrative. I mean, here's an interesting thing that's popped up in the course of the conversation today. We've reached a point now where none of them want to be
associated with it in public, or at least in that sort of forum. That's progress. When does the next chapter in this story get written? When they start admitting that it's not gone well?
Well, Magnell held a sort of meet and greet with constituents relatively recently over the constituency. So, Totnes is quite a wide, geographically quite a big.
Yeah, no, just steer you away from him to the broader question of now that they don't want to turn up and talk about it. When do we get to the next bit when they actually start?
Because there's too many dead cats to throw on the table. You've got you've got your water situation, cost of living, mortgages. They're not going to go back to Brexit because they know they're easily beaten on it. So, they can go, the current thing is mortgages. They'll go, right, okay, we'll say, we don't agree with the interest rates going up, but we need to address inflation. There are all these other dead cats that, divert
just keep
away
it moving.
from the Brexit.
And then this pops up once every 7 years, this kind of scenario, and they think, well, we'll just price in the humiliation and the obvious cowardice, and then hopefully our client journalists will succeed in their mission to get the country to start talking about other things. I see that school where the child was supposedly identifying as a cat has confirmed that they have no children in their school supposedly identifying as cats, but that won't stop people trying to inflate the great big balloon of nonsense. And I mean, interesting, actually, Mike's point about this perception of rules inside and outside the UK. The smoking ban, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong. I don't think I am, though. There's no EU ban on smoking, lads. The idea that, France has got a ban on smoking, and if you have observed French people not obeying it, you've had a different experience in France from me, indoors. But it's not an EU ban, so that's people are offering up smoking. They're saying, "Well, smoking, James, it's a great example. We all obey it, and the French don't." It's not an EU piece of legislation, the smoking ban. It's entirely decided by member states. I think Hungary has gone even further, perhaps, than we have in this area. But, again, how do you end up thinking, even if you're listening to this programme, so you've not got your head up your backside, you've somehow come away thinking... anyway, as I say, I could be wrong. It's 12:30. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
It's 12:34 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. You will be aware that the Ukraine Recovery Conference has been running in London this week, and you're probably almost certainly aware as well that the President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed it via video link, but there is a diplomatic mission in town, and a senior member of it is the deputy head of the office of the President of Ukraine, Igor Zhokva, who joins me now. Thank you for coming in. How has the conference gone?
Thank you for having me. Well, it was really good and timely because despite we're still having the Russian aggression against Ukraine and we're fighting to take back all our territories, it's high time already now to think how to recover Ukraine, how to reconstruct, how to rebuild the economy of Ukraine after the victory of Ukraine. It will definitely happen very soon manner, and very good that yesterday and the day before yesterday in London got together not only the government, the high-level officials headed by your Prime Minister and Prime Minister of Ukraine, but also up to 500 companies, representatives of business community.
What sort of things can they offer? And I mean, how much of it is words and how much of it is meaningful potential action?
Well, it's partially words still, because again, we're still in the war, but partially it's already concrete pledges from the governments. Just on the conference, President Ursula von der Leyen pledged 50 billion euros to support Ukraine in the 4-year perspective. So we are already part of the EU budgeting. Additional 3 billion guarantees from your government. But the business, you do understand the business pledge when only they see the concrete projects and the terms of references or whatever. So there were lots of meetings in different formats, B2B, on the business platform. They created this business platform and promised to have the appropriate pledges there. So this work is continuing, but very important. This is the first recovery conference where the business was among the major players together with the governments.
Good news on the NATO front as well, at least from the UK Foreign Secretary, talking about a sort of accelerated fast-track membership for Ukraine, although I think the French Foreign Minister was a bit more cautious.
We're thankful to UK government for supporting this possibility for Ukraine to start the process of invitation of Ukraine to NATO already now. We do understand that we can become members to NATO only after the victory, but nothing predicts all the allies to start in fact what is going on already now, because Ukraine is having the interoperability achieved with NATO allies on the battlefield, using the most modern equipment coming from the allies, using the sophisticated tactics, also having experience of coordinating it previously in the trainings with your forces or whatever. So Ukraine is already contributing to the Euro-Atlantic security, fighting against the biggest security threat to NATO, as is in Madrid concept. This is Russia.
Of course. And you mentioned what is going on now, and you speak, I think, inevitably with confidence, so great confidence about the ultimate victory. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the significance of the Nova Kakhovka dam incident, because I know that it's an environmental and a humanitarian catastrophe that's unfolding against the backdrop already of war.
That's unfortunately true, but this is not a mere incident.
No.
This was a terrorist attack, pre-planned by Russian occupying forces, because they managed to capture the Nova Kakhovka power plant immediately in the first days of open aggression. They're controlling it all the time. Their personnel was there, their military presence was there. So they made this deliberately blast in order to have the ecocide. And you are, the aftermaths are terrible. We managed to rescue all the people from the controlled parts of Ukrainian territory, but many on the uncontrolled part had died and are having still terrible conditions, because the Russian occupation forces are not allowing any countries to come, or any international institutions to come and rescue.
This is the bit that intrigues me, because it's currently Russian occupied, the town. So and of course Putin's warped rationale is that everybody in Ukraine is actually Russian, but the people that he is killing and hurting and damaging are the people that he claims to be trying to liberate. At the same time, right?
You really, yeah, and this is very strange. You really think Putin cares about people?
No, of course not. But I mean, the evidence that he doesn't is never going to be clearer than this.
Yes, absolutely right. That's why we don't understand why there were many doubts including in UK, whether it was a pre-planned blast or something else. No evidence you need. It's terrorist attack, and unfortunately, they can repeat it in the same manner in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Yesterday, my president was speaking about, and your country would receive all the clear evidence of what is being planted there. So we have to be on alert, not to allow this time that the terrorist attack happen, but this time on the nuclear power plant.
Your confidence in victory notwithstanding, the president has conceded that the counter-offensive hasn't moved perhaps as quickly as you might have hoped. Can you give us a broad overview of where we are militarily at the moment?
Well, I will not certainly commend you the concrete aspects of the counteroffensive. That's up to the military. We are not interfering in this.
Of course.
But I will give you the broader picture. Throughout the last half a year, we're making these counteroffensives in different parts of Ukraine. You remember how it was effective and swift, maybe around Kharkiv and Izum, in another manner, but also it was very effective around Kherson. So this time it's another way. Russians are much more prepared. The defensive lines are much more thick and whatever. But that doesn't mean that it will not end with success. You know, they are fighting with us in numbers. In quantity, we are fighting with them in quality. We are much more sophisticated. Our military commandment have much more sophisticated tactics, and your weapon, which helps us to bring the results.
Do you have a sort of, a best case scenario moment of conclusion in mind? Or is it a completely open-ended?
It's very simple. The best case scenario and the only scenario possible for Ukraine is deliberating each and every inch of Ukrainian territory.
You, before even the invasion, your job, I think, included European integration of the administration of the president of Ukraine. You put our conversations, Igor, into perspective, of course, when we're dealing with political squabbling, because we have the luxury of peace, of course. But I am interested in your thoughts, because we're in the middle of a phone-in about European Union membership and the decision to leave it for a country like Ukraine, which remains extremely keen to join the European Union. I just wonder what you think of a major member deciding to walk away from it.
Well, I will certainly not command the decision of your people, of your population. You made your choice. But if you're asking me about Ukraine, yes, we want to be among the European family. More than 90% of Ukrainians support this. It's a record high number. We never had it throughout our independence. We think we deserve to be a part of the European Union because we are already contributing not only to security, which we are talking to you about, but also to the economy. I will give you just one example. Our electricity energy markets are integrated already now. In times of war, during the open aggression, we integrated our energy system into the energy system of the European Union, and we were given the surplus energy to the EU. When Russia started to attack our critical infrastructure, EU was giving back the surplus energy. Now, when we are fine with the infrastructure, we again giving back to you. So what if not the integration in action? We will be proceeding this way. We had a very good evaluation yesterday of our progress in fulfilling 7 recommendations of the Commission.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, we are expecting the final report to be out in October in order to take the decision to start the accession negotiations for Ukraine in the end of this year.
And finally, if you would, I don't want to ask you about your personal life, but I'm interested in the impact of war on people outside government, outside the military, the civilians in Ukraine, and the fact that I suppose there's 2 angles. The first being that Putin thought it would be over very quickly. Once it wasn't over very quickly, it became an unknown. It became this war of attrition that we have now. How does that impact upon the ordinary people of Ukraine?
Putin not only thought it would be very quickly, 3-5 days, 1 week or whatever, but he thought that the people in eastern parts and southern parts of Ukraine will greet him with flowers, somehow. What was his logic? I don't know. Which never happened. People, whenever the territories were occupied for partially around Kyiv, in Kharkiv, in south, people were having their guerrilla fights with the Russian occupying forces. In the first days, they were stopping the tanks with empty hands, like laying down under the tanks or whatever. And that level of oppression made us, together with the strength of our armed forces, made us not only to withdraw, but throughout the last half of the year, we are getting back the territories. So people are doing their jobs each and every place. Civilians are working. I mean, take the repair workers who are repairing the the power plants, the critical infrastructure under the fire, because he fires immediately at the repair workers, but they're doing this. Teachers are teaching children in schools and universities, unfortunately online, but that's their job. So people are working in each and every in its own place, nearing the victory and being absolutely sure Ukraine will win.
I think that's a good point to say. Thank you, Igor Zhovkva. Many thanks for your time, and take our best wishes with you as well from everyone who listens to this programme. Thank you. It's 12:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:48. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'll tell you this because I didn't do it on the radio because Igor, who you just met, as you could tell, quite a stern individual, as you'd expect, given the seriousness of the situation that he finds himself in. And you know what I'm like. I'm basically an idiot. But I was on the bus this morning coming into work, and I knew that I was going to be spending some time with the deputy head of the office of the president of Ukraine. And I was on the top deck of the bus because I still sit in the bit where you can pretend that you're the driver, all right? Flipping sue me. I was on the top deck of the bus, and we went past the deli in Ealing, and I noticed that the deli's sign has been doctored, presumably since the war in Ukraine started, because it used to be Polish and Lithuanian, Russian and Ukrainian delicatessen, and they've put masking tape over the Russian bit. And I thought, I'll take a picture of that, and I might show it to the Ukrainian politician that's joining us later in the programme. And then I met him, and I thought he's too serious for this. So I was going to do it on air, but I didn't. I showed it to him after we'd come off air, and I'm delighted to tell you that he had a good old bellow at the sign of support there from Ealing, if you like, for what's going on there. It just struck me, little things like that, I think sometimes can be so Fascinating. It is 12:49. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's amazing, really, to reflect upon how they must process the conversation that we were having. If they imagine a Ukrainian politician, 95% support for joining the European Union, a really neat and irrefutable analysis of why it is so important for any country, let alone one in the situation that Ukraine is in, to enjoy the security, the strength in numbers, the economic cooperation, free market, single market. And then they were sitting in their hotel room last night and they put Question Time on, and they possibly heard Roof Lady talking.
To say is the reason that I wanted to come out of Brexit was because we seemed to keep to all of the rules and many foreign countries didn't. I'm just talking about people that go up on roofs, for one thing. We kept, when they brought the rules in about the safety guards, we took that on board. But when you went to France or Germany or something, they were all up on their roofs with nothing. And we were paying the cost of having to do it the right way, and they weren't. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I voted to come out.
I just can't help seeing those two analyses of European Union membership in relief to each other. Igor Zhovkva explaining the absolute importance of membership for him and his Ukrainian fellow citizens, and then the flagship discussion programme on the national broadcaster reduced to amplifying voices like that because government ministers won't go on, and nobody has actually got anything any more sensible than that to say in defence of that ludicrous decision. But as I say, we're a long way from reverse gear, I think. Dave's in Shepherd's Bush. Dave, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, Dave.
It's been a while.
It's the Dave in Shepherd's Bush, not just any old Dave in Shepherd's Bush.
Seventh time calling, still just as nervous.
Carry on.
A few things. I think confession may be the best place to start with, first of all. I have to confess, I actually stayed up late to watch that last night.
Okay.
And you crossed my mind probably more times than I'd care to admit. I was picturing you being on the panel, and I was picturing how you may react, and I think you would have probably ended up laughing, because I don't think there's anywhere else you could have gone with it.
I think you're right.
But I watched it, and I was honestly thinking, if this is a phone in tomorrow on your show, I won't be able to phone in, because if I had to explain to you what I watched last night and to describe those people, I think I would have come across as being extremely unkind. And I don't think you would have believed me. So last night, while you were on my mind, I thought there's no way could I phone in and explain what I just witnessed. But obviously now I don't have to.
Yeah.
But that show. I haven't watched it for a while. But last night I thought it was worth staying up for. But my goodness, I'll never go for an experience like that again.
But I mean, we're now in the upside down, aren't we? Really, in that you can't, as you say, you can't really shoot down these people. You can't. I mean, even Jim's been in touch to suggest that the way we've done it on the programme today even feels a bit like bullying. But you can't say she's intellectually challenged and then call people a bully for playing out her own words. Her vote was worth as much as yours.
But then if you take, for example, Mr. Redwood, as he was talking and occasionally looking down at his script, he kept looking up. He couldn't believe people were listening to him. He was actually shaking, thinking every time he finished a sentence, he looked up to see if he was allowed to carry on to say one more, He actually couldn't believe that people were listening to the drivel that was coming out of his mouth. And I get no pleasure, honestly.
No, I know.
Maybe a little bit. Well, I don't get too much pleasure out of listening to this, and I think I've been on the line holding. I'm trying to work out with the scaffolding thing. I've just the only conclusion I can come to is that when you press these people to give you a reason or a logical reason or a rule or law, I just picture that she may have been one afternoon playing bridge down the local Conservative club, and someone said, "You know what?
Yeah,
I was in France, and all the rules are implemented on us. All the rules, we pay for all the bills.
Yeah.
All the rules are forced upon us. We obey them. Look at the rules they've made up of our fishing industry. The fact that we were making rules up. Don't worry about that. It's always that how we suffer."
It's bogus victimhood. It's bogus victimhood. Everywhere you turn, poor us, poor us, poor us. And yet they're the ones that claim to be the great sort of roaring lions of English patriotism. It's such a bunch of contradictions. And
Did you see the gentleman who, I don't know if you've played it, who said about he sees them regularly, they get off a bus or a boat, straight away, they walk down the high street,
benefits,
in, they get benefits, and they get a house. Have you played them already? Sorry,
it's fine. We've been trying to work out how he knows when they come through the ferry terminal or the arrivals at Heathrow. How does he know which ones to follow?
Did he say he was a van driver or something?
I don't know.
Like I said, I don't really want to...
No, well, that's the problem. You've highlighted it, Dave. It's not a brilliant line, so I'll crack on and speak to you soon, I hope. But you've highlighted it because I am having some fun with these people today. I think that's the least they can give us in return for all the pain that they've caused us. But it inevitably flirts with condescension or sneering or whatever you want to call it. But the point is this. They had the guts to speak. The government didn't have the guts to turn up. I would much rather be having fun at Rishi Sunak's expense today, or Brexit hardman Steve Baker's expense today, or Jeremy Hunt's expense today, or Grant Shapps' expense today, or Therese Coffey's expense today. You don't even have to be in the cabinet. I would much rather be having fun at Liz Truss's expense today. Anybody senior, think of someone whose name you actually know. I'd much rather be having fun at their expense today, but they didn't have the guts to turn up. So the mockery of the people that did is bittersweet, as Dave just identifies. It's bittersweet because they make as much sense as Rishi Sunak would have done. Just think about the Jacob Rees-Mogg rule. Think about what we used to call the curly perm and shell suit test. You want to find out whether someone's clever or not, stick them in a shell suit with a curly perm and listen to the words that they say. I'm thinking of that sort of calm down stereotype from the 80s. Because the only reason people think that Jacob Rees-Mogg knows what he's talking about is snobbery, inverse snobbery. All of those people make as much sense and have as many interesting things to say as the government would have done last night. And at least they would say, benefits boy, roof lady, at least they had the guts to turn up. I'm not including Redwood in that analysis because he's sort of become the new Daniel Hannan. Where the hell is Daniel Hannan, by the way? Does anybody see? He used to say yes to every invitation. He used to have, yes, certainly, on his answer phone message. So producers would ring up and say, would you come on a programme to spout absolute bilge about your opinion? Yes, certainly. I'm Daniel Hannan. I'll be there at tea time. Where's he gone? Never thought the day would come where I was almost missing Daniel Hannan. But he's another example of someone who promised sunlit uplands and then flipped off. Last word, I don't know if I've got time. Sorry, Josh, I went off on one. But you were there, I think, last night. So this will be interesting, I hope.
I was, yeah. Hello, mate.
Hello.
We haven't spoken before, but I consider you a mate because I listen every day.
What a lovely thing to say. I consider you a mate as well. Carry on.
Thank you. I was there last night. Just to address the elephant in the room, I voted to leave, obviously. But within about 6 months...
That's me trying to make an elephant noise.
There you go. Within about 6 months, I had changed. I listened to you back then as well. I remember Karen, the German lady, and feeling awful amount of guilt for that call. Sure. So I was in a minority, I think.
Yes, you were.
In that I had changed my mind. I was in a minority because I wasn't of a certain age as well. And I was on telly. I asked the last question.
Oh, well
But I have a little theory about why the government didn't send anybody. If you look at the responses by John and Ben, who are the two Brexiters on the panel, their responses were basically, it's a missed opportunity. Right. Brexit could be good if we do this, that and the other. Now, if the government go on, Fiona or somebody from the audience can hold them to account and say, you have the power to do it, why aren't you doing it?
You're in charge.
So they either have the option of saying that and then being called out and looking to be fools, or they know it's rubbish, so they wouldn't have anything to say in the first place.
So, I think that's the only camouflage left, is that there is a brilliant Brexit, but it goes to a different school, at which point you point out, well, you're the headmaster, so
exactly,
why haven't we got it here? Yeah, I think that it is probably that simple. When does it snap, though, Josh? When does that become unsustainable, that ludicrous fig leaf?
I think it's either going to go one or two ways. They're going to be able to do all the things that the people from the sidelines are sort of shouting. I don't think they're going to be able to do them, but they're going to get to a point where they have to admit that they can't do them, or they're going to try it and then say, oh, we tried it, but it doesn't work. Or, and my question is around the future and the Brexit strategy from the two main parties, or we have a Labour government, and I don't really know what their plan is.
No, nor do
If you
I.
listened to the replies last night, it didn't clear anything up.
No, I know.
But that is Labour in, and maybe they try and soften it up a little bit.
They're the Obi-Wan Kenobi, aren't they, at the moment? They are our only hope, although there's not a great deal of flesh on the bones of whatever the hell it is they plan to do. I know what they're not going to do, and it's not good, really. Josh, what a lovely way to end. So you've closed two big national shows in 2 days now. You closed Newsnight, Question Time last night, and you're closing the James O'Brien Experience today.
Yeah, I was dreading. Luckily, I haven't become a meme overnight. These poor people that
Yes, no, that is the ultimate test, isn't it? Well done. Thank you. That's it from me for another week. 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 That's it from me for another